Hello everyone, a very good evening and welcome to Byju's Exam Prep. Welcome back to our discussion on disaster management. Yesterday was the first class and we had covered some very important concepts. Yesterday we spoke about what is a disaster, what is a hazard, and we understood the concept of disaster risk. I even explained what is vulnerability, what is exposure. We spoke about the disaster management cycle and India's vulnerability to disasters. So all these important concepts have been discussed. We even spoke about different types of hazards, natural and man-made hazards. And we started with the first disaster, that is floods. We understood how floods are caused. We also spoke about the impact of floods. So today I'll be resuming my discussion from here and we'll understand which are the nodal agencies for early warning and forecasting with regard to floods and flood-related hazards in the country. All these facts I'm giving you can be very important for your prelims. So once I complete this discussion, we will talk about disaster management for floods. How can we implement a disaster management cycle to tackle floods and to minimize their impact? So this will complete the first disaster and then we'll take up the other disasters. So before I begin, please don't forget the feedback form for last week's classes has been shared with you. Last week, if I'm not wrong, you guys had modern history and ethics. So the feedback form for the last week classes has been shared. So please don't forget to fill out the feedback form. So with this, let's start the discussion for today and look at the nodal agencies for early warning with regard to floods and other related hazards. When it comes to estimating rainfall, for providing rainfall forecasts in our country, the designated agency is the IMD, India Meteorological Department, which is under the Ministry of Earth Sciences, is the nodal ministry for providing early warning and forecasts for heavy rainfall. If you're reading newspapers, you would have noticed this. Since India is going through a very intense monsoon period, several states have been receiving heavy rainfall. And almost every day, IMD is giving out alerts, yellow alert, orange alert, so that the authorities and the people can be on their guard. They can take the precautions that are needed to protect themselves from the impact of heavy rainfall. So with regard to rains, the forecasting agency is IMD. When it comes to river floods, flooding of rivers, the early warning agency is the CWC, the Central Water Commission, which will work with the state irrigation departments. Central Water Commission keeps a check of the water level in all the major dams of the country. It monitors the water levels in the rivers, and if the danger level is being breached, immediate alerts are given out by Central Water Commission to the concerned authorities. When it comes to managing drainage, particularly in urban areas, this is with regard to urban flooding. Managing sewage and drainage will be the responsibility of the local municipal corporation and the local authorities. In every city, there could be a local water board or the municipal corporations themselves or the PWD departments. They will be responsible for drainage and sewage related flooding. With regard to geomorphologic features, that is to understand the terrain and the drainage basin and the topography of a region, Geological Survey of India is the nodal agency. The GS3 conducts topographical mapping of the country, and this data is very crucial to understand the nature of water flow, how water flows in a particular drainage basin. Based on this, you can estimate whether flood situations can arise. So this data is also important. With regard to satellite-based mapping, for satellite-based mapping and images, it is the NRSC, the National Remote Sensing Center of the ISRO. The National Remote Sensing Center makes use of satellite images from ISRO's satellites and provides accurate maps. Then water logging in cities is also dealt with by the local water boards, municipal corporations, or PWD departments. All right, so one should be familiar with these organizations that deal with floods and flood-related hazards. But please at least remember rainfall and river floods. The first two will be more important. Even if you don't remember the rest, it is still fine. But for rainfall, it is IMD. River floods, it is Central Water Commission. These 2 points, the first 2 points, are very important for your prelims. Next, coming to the forecasting model. For forecasting floods, the Central Water Commission has come out with a color-coded scale. Just like IMD has a color-coded scale for heavy rainfall, similarly, for giving alerts on various river basins and the flood levels, Central Water Commission also has come out with a color-coded scale. You have yellow alert, orange alert, and finally red alert. So depending on the danger level, depending on the water level, these color-coded alerts are issued so that it becomes easier to understand. For local authorities and for the people, color-coded alerts are always easy to understand. Now see, if technical data is given out, common man cannot understand that. Right? You and me, we can't understand what does it mean water level above 0.5 meters less than high flood level. We can't understand the technical parameters. So when it comes to early warning, forecasting and alerts, the alert has to be simple. It has to be something that a common man, even an uneducated person, can easily understand. That is why color-coded schemes are designed. So CWC gives out these color-coded alerts depending on flood levels in different river basins of the country. Is that clear? Now we come to the last part of the discussion. We should understand how can we manage floods. Maybe floods can't be prevented entirely, right? Because floods are a result of a complex interplay of meteorological factors, geographical factors, and some man-made factors as well. Even if we can regulate some of the man-made factors, the rest of it is not under our control, right? We don't have control over rainfall. We don't have control over topography of a region, over the drainage basin. This is beyond human control. So if not preventing floods, we can at least mitigate the impact. By implementing the disaster management cycle and by planning and by preparing in the pre-disaster phase, we can reduce the impact of floods. So let's see how we can do this. The first step in disaster management planning is to carry out a risk analysis. That is, you understand the hazard first. Through scientific methods, you have to make use of your institutions, scientific institutions like IMD, ISRO, and the others, collect the relevant data from them, and understand the nature of the hazard. Also understand the vulnerability of our country. Understand which regions are more prone to the impact. Where is the highest risk with regard to this hazard? And based on that, create a map. Remember, I showed you the map yesterday, the hazard map of India for floods. Once you carry out the risk analysis, you know which areas, which regions are more vulnerable. Is that clear? So understanding the hazard, the factors responsible, and mapping out the vulnerable regions is the first step in risk analysis, which is part of planning and preparedness. Planning and preparedness is part of pre-disaster measures, which is the first stage in the disaster management cycle. Got it? So you conduct a thorough risk analysis, understand the nature of the hazard, the factors contributing to it, the vulnerability of our country, and create a detailed map. Understood? So this helps in taking the right decisions for the further steps. This helps in planning better, preparing better, which is a crucial step in the pre-disaster phase. Next, make the right investments in forecasting technology. You have to invest in the technology, create that infrastructure needed to predict heavy rainfall, to predict cloudburst events, to estimate water levels in the water bodies, and give out real-time alerts. This is the next step in pre-disaster measures. So institutions like IMD, Central Water Commission, etc., they will establish that infrastructure. Even ISRO plays an important role. So such institutions play a very, very important role in forecasting and early warning. Through satellites, through Doppler radars, through rain gauges and sensors around the country, real-time data has to be collected so that we can predict and forecast the upcoming hazard, and immediately early warning alerts can be given out. So these alerts are issued to the central government, all the concerned entities of the central government, like the NDMA, the Home Ministry, Defense Ministry, right, Cabinet Secretariat, all of them are alerted at the central level. Similarly, at the state level, the state government, the state disaster management authority, the Home Department, all these concerned authorities at the state level, also at the district level and at the grassroots level. So across the 4 tiers, from national to local, all the concerned stakeholders should get these alerts in real time. That is when the authorities will take action. That is when they know the threat is coming up and they know what to do because they've been trained to implement certain measures. So real-time alerts is very, very crucial for timely evacuation of people from the highest risk area. Low-lying areas can be evacuated, right? Tourists can be evacuated and human activities can be restricted for a few days to ensure that the impact of the floods are limited. So these are very, very important measures which are enabled through early warning and forecasting. Next, through planning and preparedness, you can reduce the velocity of the runoff. The velocity with which water is flowing can be reduced. The surface runoff can be reduced through various structural measures. That is, you create certain structures to contain the water or divert the excess water or to hold the excess water back. Got it? You can contain the water flow. You can divert the flood waters or hold back the flow of water in order to manage the flood. But this requires years of planning and implementation. So flood diversion is possible through these structural measures. The surplus water can be diverted. So you build embankments, dams, canals. You increase groundwater percolation. If you allow more water to seep into the groundwater table, a lot of water on the surface can be removed. Then you can also implement strategies to ensure that the floods are contained through flood barriers. At vulnerable spots, flood barriers can be built by using strong material like steel, iron, etc. You can create flood barriers to hold the water back. You can construct embankments, create more dams and canals, and promote groundwater percolation so that you are reducing the surface runoff and distributing the water scientifically in order to ensure that floods are contained. Along with that, floodplain zoning is very, very important. In fact, for every disaster, implementing zoning standards or zonation standards is extremely important. What do you mean by this? It means based on vulnerability, you restrict or regulate human activities and economic activities. This is called as zoning or zonation, and this is a valuable step in any disaster, be it an industrial disaster, be it earthquakes or floods or tsunamis. In any disaster, zoning or zonation is very, very important. See, now that we have a hazard vulnerability map, we know specifically which regions are more riskier. In those areas, you can restrict and regulate human activities and economic activities. For example, in low-lying floodplain zones, you can restrict urbanization, you can restrict farming, you can regulate tourism and other construction activities. So by ensuring that people are not present in the risky zones, you are automatically mitigating the impact. The impact is higher when we are building cities, resorts, and towns in the floodplain zones. Correct? So if we identify those risky areas and regulate or prohibit or restrict the construction activities, prevent human habitation and economic activities there, then automatically the impact will go down. Take, for example, Uttarakhand. I told you yesterday, Uttarakhand is very badly affected by floods every year. In Uttarakhand, tourism has been overexploited. And there is large-scale construction happening as well. There is a lot of urbanization happening in the hilly forested areas. So what we have done is that we have deforested the hilly slopes, thereby increasing the water runoff, the surface runoff. And in the valleys and the floodplain zones, we have built cities, we have built resorts, and we have constructed buildings. So there are a lot of people living in the risky areas. So obviously, when there is excess rainfall or when there is a cloudburst, it results in flash floods, and all these low-lying areas will get completely flooded. So the buildings will get destroyed, infrastructure will be damaged, many people will be killed. You can avoid all of this very easily through zonation standards. So planning the zoning standards and implementing them is extremely important. Planning the zonation standards and enforcing them, both are very, very important steps in pre-disaster planning and preparedness. All right, please remember this point. This will apply for every disaster. Just like early warning risk analysis will apply for almost every disaster, similarly, implementing zonation standards will apply for every single disaster. Understood? Now, take for example cyclones or earthquakes. Since we know which regions are more vulnerable, in those regions, through zonation standards, we can regulate the buildings which are being constructed, the material they are using, the design through which buildings are being built, to ensure that the buildings can withstand the impact of earthquakes or cyclones. These are some simple measures we can take which will give us results in the long term. So implementing floodplain zoning is a very, very important step. Next, you have to conserve the natural buffers. I told you yesterday, nature has its own equilibrium. We humans have destroyed and disturbed that equilibrium. We need to ensure that we protect the forests, we protect wetlands, etc. All these are natural sinks. They absorb the excess water or cut off the speed with which the water is flowing. Now imagine in a slopey area, if you have thick forests and dense jungles, the flow of water will be automatically restricted because of the vegetation. Even the soil will hold back because the soil has some support, because the roots of the plants are holding the soil back. So landslides can also be prevented. But if we deforest this hilly slopey area, if we destroy the forest cover for building roads and creating agricultural fields and cities, what will happen? Water will flow unchecked. Water will flow at a very high speed, thus weakening the soil, saturating the soil with water, and the whole soil material can come crashing down, causing a landslide. So one way to prevent all of this is to conserve and protect your natural buffers. So promote afforestation, conserve the forest areas, and similarly protect the wetlands and water bodies. We have polluted our lakes, cut off the catchment canals and channels through which water flows through. We have encroached on forest land and lake beds and river beds. So prevent the encroachment, clear all the waste material that we have thrown. Conserve and protect these wetlands and natural sinks where excess water can naturally flow, thus preventing the impact of floods. Got it? So it's a very, very important step. Again, it comes under pre-disaster planning and preparedness itself. Next, you have risk transfer. Sometimes disasters can't be avoided. No matter what we do, disasters will happen, impact will be there. But what we can do is that we can transfer the risk. Now, what do you mean by this and how do you transfer risk? Risk can be transferred through insurance. I'm talking about financial risk, the economic risk associated with the disaster. If, let's say, farmers have lost their cattle and their farmland due to floods, or let's say several people have lost their homes because of floods, they've suffered economic loss, their livelihood has been destroyed. So how do you compensate those people? Every time government can't keep paying the money, paying the compensation. Even the government may not have enough funds. So one way to transfer the risk is to promote disaster-linked insurance. Usually, insurance companies do not provide insurance for disasters because they treat a disaster as an act of God. But if the government works with the insurance providers and regulators, we can come out with insurance products which can insure and protect the people so that the financial and economic risk can be transferred. Since everybody would be paying the premium, a pool of money will be collected. And once the disaster hits a particular region, those affected victims can be helped out through insurance, which acts as a compensation. So risk transfer has to be implemented as a regular process in the disaster management cycle. Next, watershed management. Watershed management is nothing but management of water in a drainage basin. In a particular river basin, how do you manage the water? You manage the water through dams, canals, irrigation projects, etc. So through better planning and by scientifically building dams, canals, etc., right, you can manage the flow of water and utilization of water in the entire drainage basin. This is a crucial step. Integrated watershed management is a crucial step. Is that clear? So central government, state government, they play a very, very important role in watershed management. So if these measures are taken, right, the flow of water can be more scientifically managed and utilized, thus reducing the impact of the floods. And of course, you focus on post-disaster management as well, which includes reconstruction and rehabilitation. So once the floods have occurred, what do? First, of course, you provide emergency relief. You provide emergency relief and response. This is during disaster. During disaster, you ensure that you deploy your disaster response forces, such as NDRF, SDRF, or the armed forces. They all have specialized training with regard to search and rescue operations. As I told you yesterday, in any disaster, people could be trapped, right? It's very important to rescue them immediately. So we have specialized forces like NDRF and SDRF, which has been established through the Disaster Management Act, the National Disaster Response Force and the State Disaster Response Force. These well-trained, well-equipped forces, if they are deployed even before the disaster occurs, right, they will immediately start their search and rescue operations and their evacuation operations. Since we have early warning, right, we know that in a particular region, heavy rainfall is expected 1 or 2 days earlier. So you can bring the NDRF and SDRF troops, station them nearby, and keep them ready with all the equipment. They will have special equipment with them. They will have boats, life jackets, gas cutters, because when material collapses, right, the forces will have to cut through the material. So they'll have all kinds of equipment, including drones and dog squads, canine squads, right? So they'll have a host of resources with them, equipment with them, and to their specialized training, they can rescue people immediately. And if necessary, the armed forces can also be called in. Indian Army, the Indian Navy, Indian Air Force. They can be pressed into action if necessary. So they can provide helicopters. They can bring professional divers, right? So they will play a role in search and rescue operations. And under this phase, you provide medical assistance, provide food and shelter, immediate compensation. All of this can be arranged in the during disaster phase when you're providing emergency relief and response. But once the disaster has happened, a few days later, then you start focusing on post-disaster management. So you try to reconstruct the infrastructure. You try to rehabilitate the people who have been displaced. So all these recovery measures have to be implemented in the long run. Is that clear? You have to rebuild the economy, create alternate jobs so that people have a livelihood, people have a source of income. You provide long-term compensation if necessary. Help the people to rebuild their houses. The government has to rebuild the critical infrastructure, roads, railway lines, power cables, internet, and mobile connectivity. All of this would have been uprooted. So such essential infrastructure has to be rebuilt. So reconstruction, rehabilitation is the focus of post-disaster management. So broadly, these are the measures that can be implemented in order to mitigate the impact of floods. Got it? I've given you a detailed explanation. This is more than enough. UPSC might ask a question on these lines. It might ask you, what are floods? What causes floods? And how do we manage floods as a disaster? How do we mitigate the impact of floods? So such questions can be asked. So you have to list out these steps based on the disaster management cycle. So what you can do is you can briefly explain the disaster management cycle and the 3 stages that are involved in a small paragraph. You can draw the disaster management cycle as well, and then list out these points with a small brief explanation. Understood? So this is the approach we will follow for every disaster, be it droughts or earthquakes or cyclones. Even there, we will have a similar discussion. The points will be a little similar. So please understand this clearly so that going forward, the discussion will become very, very simple. All right? So I hope you guys have understood everything. If you have any questions, please bring it up. With regard to floods, if you have any doubts, let me know, because I'll be moving on to the next disaster, that is droughts. All right? So take a couple of minutes and let me know if you have any questions. Santosh is asking what is meant by PWD. PWD is the Public Works Department, responsible for civil work in cities, like Delhi, for example. How to reduce runoff? Surface runoff of water can be reduced through various measures. Afforestation is an example. If you increase the forest cover and vegetation cover, the flow of water will be cut, right? Because water will face obstruction. If you have deforested the area, water will flow through easily, thus increasing the chances of floods and landslides. So afforestation is one example through which, or one measure through which you can reduce surface runoff. Or there are other measures as well, like you create better canals, you increase groundwater percolation, so where water gets diverted and the excess water can be taken off, thus reducing the surface runoff. Nikki is asking, sir, flood forecasting is not clear. It's very simple. See, floods can be forecasted depending on the reason which is causing the flood, right? We do have enough technology today to provide for quite accurate forecasts. So if we can predict heavy rainfall before, if we can predict a possible cloud burst before it actually happens. Based on that, flash flood alerts can be issued. Correct? So by monitoring water levels in the rivers and the dams, you can issue early warning and alerts. So that is called forecasting and early warning. So you make use of satellite images to study the meteorological phenomena, which is the task of IMD. That's how IMD figures out the rainfall patterns and the estimated rainfall. Is that clear? There are Doppler radars to estimate the movement of clouds, rain-bearing clouds. There are rain gauges and sensors installed around the country to measure rainfall in real time. So data collected from all the sources is assessed. It is put to a supercomputer, through a forecasting model, which provides for estimates. And based on that, alerts can be given. So when you have forecasting and early warning, you can take precautionary measures. You can alert the authorities and the people, and they can all be evacuated before the disaster happens. Repeat integrated watershed management. See, watershed management is nothing but the scientific management of water, water usage, water flow, and water utilization in a given drainage area. Now you take a river, for example, take Kaveri River or Mahanadi, for example. That is one drainage basin, right? The entire area where the waters of the Mahanadi is flowing through, including its tributaries, right? The whole area is the drainage basin, wherever the water is collecting through and flowing into the Mahanadi River. The entire region is the drainage basin. So you can scientifically manage how the water flows through the drainage basin by constructing dams, embankments, canals, diverting water for irrigation, storing water what is needed, and effectively utilizing the water. So this broadly is called watershed management. You are basically managing the whole drainage basin and the availability of water in that area. So if you effectively manage the water levels, you can try to minimize the impact of floods. Mohammed Shanwaz is asking, so as per a report in the last 2 decades, 2 million people died by drowning, but 90% cases was in low and middle income countries. Why and how to manage the disaster? See, drowning by itself is not a disaster. Drowning can occur due to various reasons, right? Drowning can happen due to floods as well, and even due to accidents. So drowning itself is not a disaster, but drowning occurring because of floods, yes, that is definitely a disaster. And the loss of life occurring through floods is usually through drowning, right? And I mentioned this yesterday. Usually, poor countries take a bigger impact of any disaster because they're not prepared. They don't have the measures, they don't have the technology, they don't have the training. So low-income countries, poor countries, they bear the biggest impact of any disaster, not just floods. All right. So what do? You implement the disaster management cycle. Developed countries have to help them. They have to give funds, give technology, share the expertise. The United Nations has to play a role. That is why under Sustainable Development Goals, there is a target to reduce disasters and the impact by assisting the small poor countries. Even under Sendai framework, which we will discuss later, there is a provision for sharing finance and technology and expertise with poor, low-income and middle-income countries. So that is how you tackle the impact of disasters. Himanshi is asking, is disaster management the responsibility of state or center? It's both. Central and state governments both share a responsibility with regard to disaster management. Don't worry, you'll understand this. We'll come to the disaster management architecture in India. There I'll explain the role of central government and state governments. Shruti is asking, repeat risk transfer, please. Risk transfer is about transferring the economic risk. Now, how do you transfer economic risk? Now, let's say I have a car. I bought a new car. I paid 15 lakh rupees, brand new car, but it met with an accident. Now, instead of me taking the risk, the financial risk, what do? I get my car insured. The insurance company will compensate. Correct? So you're transferring the financial risk, the economic risk to an insurance mechanism. Is that clear? In any developed country, almost everyone will have insurance coverage in almost every segment. Right? Be it vehicles, health insurance, life insurance, even for disasters. Generally, insurance companies do not provide insurance for disasters. But if the government works with them, creates a incentivized model, right? The companies can come up with insurance policies for the disaster victims. And people who have subscribed, who have paid the premium, they will get immediate compensation, thereby transferring the financial risk. Devansh is asking how to conserve natural buffers. Through your conservation measures, you protect forests, prevent deforestation, promote afforestation, prevent pollution of your wetlands, clear the silt and sediments, prevent encroachment and the throwing of garbage and waste in rivers and wetlands. All these are conservation measures. Okay. So now let's move on to the next topic. Let's look at next disaster, that is droughts. In a way, droughts is like the opposite of floods. Floods happen because of excess of water. Droughts happen because of scarcity of water. All right, but it's not that simple, of course. Let's understand the phenomena behind droughts. Let's also understand its impact and the factors that are responsible for droughts. All right, so let's study this in detail. Drought is a period of below average precipitation or below average rainfall in a particular region. All right, when there is scarcity of rainfall, when the rainfall in a given region is below average over a certain period of time, then this could result in water shortages. The water shortage could occur in the atmosphere, on the surface, and also in the groundwater table. Please don't forget, water can be found not just on the surface of the earth. You can find water below the surface as well in the groundwater table. You can find water in the atmosphere as well through moisture. That is water vapor, right? So the scarcity of water in all these mediums is what causes a drought. Due to low rainfall over 1 or 2 seasons, the availability of water goes down in a given region, and this acute scarcity causes a disaster known as drought. Now, drought is a very unique disaster. It's not like floods or earthquakes or cyclones. Those are instantaneous disasters. We can all perceive the impact of earthquake or a cyclone or a flood because they are instantaneous, because they happen almost instantly with very little notice. Is that clear? So they're more spontaneous disasters, and you can see the destruction they leave behind, right? Physically, it's very evident. Have you ever seen pictures of an area hit by cyclone or an earthquake or even floods? You can see the physical damage in front of you. So we all tend to pay more attention to such attention-grabbing disasters because they are instantaneous, they're spontaneous. They appear to be very violent, causing large-scale destruction in a very short time. But drought is not like that. Drought is very different. It is a prolonged disaster. It's like slow poison, something that kills over a long period of time. Droughts don't happen in seconds or hours or days. It happens over weeks and months and years. So it's very, very difficult to perceive the impact of such disasters. It is difficult to perceive the actual impact because it's not a highly dramatic disaster like earthquakes or floods or cyclones. See, when floods or earthquakes happen, immediately the attention of the people, media, the government, everything, right? Everyone, they start paying attention to it immediately because of the nature of the calamity. It's destructive, highly violent, causing large-scale devastation within seconds and minutes. So by human nature, we tend to pay more attention to such instantaneous events, such spontaneous disasters. But what about disasters like droughts, which happen over months and years? You can't really perceive the impact. You can't physically see the impact immediately. You don't realize the overall scale of the impact. But people who suffer in that region, right, they go through enormous suffering. Let's say you're an outsider and you're passing through a drought-hit region. You will not immediately perceive the impact. You feel everything is fine in that region. But imagine if you go through a region hit by floods or earthquakes, the destruction is immediately evident to you. So by nature, you will think that earthquakes, floods are more important. We should pay more attention only to these disasters. Not really. Even disasters like droughts deserve equal attention because these are prolonged disasters. They occur over a very long period of time. You don't perceive the impact in real time. But people of the region, the victims, who actually bear the burden of drought, only they know the pain and suffering it causes. And the worst part about droughts is that it primarily affects rural areas and agriculture. And as a result, it is our farmers who are already struggling with numerous issues and challenges. They are the ones who will unfortunately suffer the most. Is that clear? People in urban areas, cities, they might feel the impact much later. But in rural areas, that in agrarian economies, farmers will bear the biggest impact of droughts. So droughts will hit the poor population more severely. It will affect everyone, even the rich, but the impact is manageable. But for the poor people, for farmers, vulnerable sections, the impact is unbearable. All right. So it's primarily caused due to shortage of rainfall over a prolonged period of time in a given region, causing water scarcity in the atmosphere, on the surface, and also in the groundwater table. So changes in climate, weather, both can drive the occurrence of drought. Long-term changes in climate can also reduce rainfall. So long-term climate change is also a factor that is responsible. There are other temporary aberrations as well that can contribute to drought. All right. Temporary seasonal changes like a El Nino phenomena. As we discussed yesterday, currently we are heading towards an El Nino season, which will have an adverse effect on the Indian monsoons. So for the next couple of years or maybe more, we will see an adverse impact of the El Nino on Indian monsoons. And in some parts of the country, there will be lesser rainfall or rainfall might go missing entirely. So these areas will suffer from aridity. Aridness is the lack of water, the lack of moisture, right? So such conditions which occur due to shortage of rainfall turns into a deadly disaster, which we call as drought. Understood? Now, the reason why it is so unique and different is because you can't really determine when droughts begin and when it exactly ends. This is very important. Now, in case of instantaneous disasters, we can pinpoint when the floods might happen, when the cyclone might hit. Is that clear? Earthquakes, they happen for a few seconds, the tremors will follow, but after a few days, everything will go back to normal. But drought is not like that. You can't exactly figure out when the drought conditions began, when it will end. It might take months or years. So if you can't identify the period where the disaster is occurring, right, then taking the measures will become very difficult. Next, the duration, as I told you, is prolonged. Its impact will be felt for months and years, maybe even decades. And there is no single indicator to which you can identify that drought has begun. It's not that there's one parameter you monitor and you say that drought has begun. You don't have any such methods. In terms of cyclone, it's quite easy. Today we have the technology to forecast cyclones, to track cyclones accurately. Even tsunamis, we can track them in real time. But there is no single indicator that marks the beginning of drought and the severity of the drought. And also, droughts occur over a very, very large area. Compared to other hazards, droughts occur over very large geographical extents. It can happen in an entire state or across multiple states, whereas other disasters are usually limited to few villages, few districts. Like you take the latest floods in Himachal Pradesh. Few districts, few villages have been affected in the river basin, right? Not the whole of Himachal Pradesh. You take cyclones, Cyclone Biparjoy that recently hit Gujarat. It's not the whole west coast of India which is affected. Only few particular districts in Gujarat suffered the biggest impact. So other disasters have a limited geographical impact, but droughts, they occur over a large spatial area. They affect a very large area, including an entire state or multiple states or the entire country. It's very difficult to assess the impact and quantify the damage which is occurring. Is that clear? It's essentially a slow kill disaster. You can't immediately identify the damage which has occurred. You can't clearly pinpoint how many people have lost their lives. What's the impact on the economy? Right? It's not easy to quantify the impact. So this makes drought a very unique disaster and very challenging as well to deal with. And like I said, the worst part is that the impact of drought is felt largely by the poor people, farmers, and the rural agrarian economy. Because droughts are deadly for farming. It destroys productivity. Crops will be destroyed, and farmers' income will take a hit. Even animal husbandry will take a hit. If you don't have enough water to feed the cattle and other animals, right? How will they survive? So droughts can be disastrous, and it contributes to many other incidents. It can give rise to outbreak of diseases. It will result in food insecurity, malnutrition. Malnutrition will create health deficiencies, disorders, and more diseases as well. So it's very hard to quantify the impact. Got it? In a drought-hit area, there are high chances of breakout of infectious diseases. Because in a drought-hit area, let's say there's a very small water pond. The stagnant water would have been polluted. There could be pathogens present in it. So people who take that water for drinking, which is stagnant, which has become turbid, right, which might contain harmful pathogens, they get infected with various diseases. Due to shortage of food, food prices will increase, inflation will go up in the economy, and poor people can't afford expensive food. Farmers and in rural areas, the poor people, right, they will not access good nutrition, and the whole family will suffer. Children, women will suffer. So if there is no good nutrition, no food security, it gives rise to deficiencies, disorders, and even more health diseases. It will affect education as well. It will affect the ability to work in such conditions, right, in such oppressive conditions where temperatures also are high, where health has been affected. People can't work at their full capacity. So droughts take a huge economic toll. Particularly in the rural economy, droughts deliver a huge economic impact. So there are three types of droughts that are distinguished. According to experts and meteorologists, there are three types and three stages in droughts. First, you have meteorological drought. This is a drought occurring due to deficiency of rainfall. Let's say in one season, if rainfall is less or absent, then there will be some water scarcity, and this is called a meteorological drought. This is the first stage. Next comes hydrological drought, where there is a large-scale deficiency in water supply itself due to prolonged low rainfall. If meteorological drought continues, let's say for 2 or 3 seasons, then all the surface and subsurface water will be exhausted. Dams will run short of water. Groundwater table will be overexploited. Lakes and ponds will also be overexploited. So if meteorological drought persists for 2-3 years, let's say rainfall is not occurring at ideal levels for 2 to 3 years, rainfall is very low or almost absent in a given region, those arid, semi-arid areas, they will quickly run out of surface water. If rainfall is affected for a prolonged period, for multiple seasons, it will turn to hydrological drought, where there is a critical shortage of water in all the water sources. All right, there will be no water for irrigation, no water for drinking, no water for industries. So this is called hydrological drought. And then comes the worst of all, agricultural drought. This is triggered by prolonged periods of meteorological hydrological drought, where even soil moisture becomes inadequate. This is where soil loses its productivity. Soil's fertility will get affected in this stage. If hydrological and meteorological drought continues for 3-4 years, then obviously whatever moisture is present in the soil will go away. And the deficiency in rainfall, if it continues after this, it will destroy soil fertility. It will directly affect the cultivation of crops. It will affect the vegetation as well. It will affect the environment, the forests. Even animals and birds and aquatic animals will be hit. Is that clear? This is the last and worst stage of drought, that is the agricultural drought. So meteorological drought occurs in one season. If rainfall is in short supply for one season, we call it a meteorological drought. This is easily manageable. We can recover from this if rainfall returns back. But if meteorological drought continues for 2-3 seasons, then you will witness hydrological drought, where there is a shortage of water everywhere. There's no groundwater available, no surface water, no drinking water, no water for irrigation. And then if it continues for a further season, let's say meteorological hydrological drought continues for 3-4 years, then comes agricultural drought. Due to the complete inadequacy of soil moisture, cropping seasons will be completely affected. The land will almost become barren. You can't cultivate anything, thus hitting agriculture, production, food security, and contributing to severe socio-economic challenges. So this is why the impact of drought is very high. It has one of the highest socio-economic impact. In this case, people will not die immediately. There's no loss of life happening immediately. When hydrological drought happens or meteorological drought happens, people will not die immediately, like earthquakes or floods. The death will happen later in a prolonged cycle. For example, farmers who are affected, they will take a lot of debt. Since they have lost their income, they're not able to sustain their livelihood. They'll start borrowing more money, usually from money lenders. They can't repay the debt. They fall into a debt burden. And you will see that farmers' suicides will skyrocket in such drought-hit areas. There are few pockets in India which are notorious for farmers' suicides. These are regions where droughts are very common. It's not a coincidence. All right, there are few pockets in India which are arid, semi-arid regions which are frequently affected by drought. That is where we report the highest level of farmer suicides. That's because farming has been very severely affected because of repeated drought cycles. Can anyone name such a region in India which is very badly affected by droughts? Any specific region in India where farmer suicides happens to be very high? Can someone name or give an example for such a region in the country? Let me see how many of you have that knowledge. Mohana has given a right answer. Many others are also mentioning the correct answer. Padmavati, Kartikeya, Anurag, Godavari, Jaswant, Jadhav, and many others. Have you heard of the Amravati Vidarbha region in Maharashtra? In Maharashtra, in interior Maharashtra, you have the Amravati Vidarbha region, which is an arid semi-arid region affected by repeated drought cycles, and farmers here are under severe debt burden. Farmer suicides are extremely high in this part of Maharashtra. There are few pockets in Telangana, in Karnataka, Rajasthan, and many other pockets where you see the direct impact of droughts. In northeast part of Karnataka, towards Bijapur, Bagalkot, Bellary, right? This is again an arid semi-arid region where farmers struggle to grow crops, and even if there is a single drought cycle, right, farmers will come under severe stress. They borrow money, they come under debt burden, and they commit suicides. You see this happening in parts of Gujarat and Rajasthan as well, in parts of Telangana, parts of Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, in the Bundelkhand region of Madhya Pradesh and UP. Even there, farmer suicides are very high. Even in Bihar, there are pockets where droughts are quite common, right? So the socio-economic impact of drought is very, very severe. You and us, the common people, cannot really estimate or feel the impact, but people in the rural areas, the farmers, they take the biggest burden. All right, eventually it will affect everyone. It will affect every single person in the country. It will affect the world as well. Massive droughts can completely destabilize the global food markets. Food prices will shoot up, causing massive inflation. It can disrupt supply chains. I'll tell you one very interesting incident. I'm sure many of you know that India has banned the export of rice. Non-basmati rice exports has been banned because rice production has gone down due to adverse weather conditions, drought and floods, etc. So to ensure that we don't face a shortage of rice, the government of India has banned recently all non-basmati rice exports. And this has already disrupted the rice supply chains. In the US, there is a mad rush amongst NRIs to go and purchase all the available rice in the market because they fear that few months down the line there won't be rice available. Right? Prices have shot up. Non-basmati rice prices already shot up around the world because of India banning rice exports. This is just one example. Now imagine if there is a large-scale drought across multiple countries. Just a few years back, there was a severe drought in parts of Russia which affected potato production. Russia is a major producer of potatoes. So Russia also restricted potato exports and disrupted the global food supply chains. So this price rise which happens in food commodities will affect everyone. All right? It will increase inflation. It will have a huge economic impact even on the urban population as well. So that is the devastating impact of drought. Now let's take a more detailed look at this. Let's understand various kinds of impact of drought conditions. Let's look at the environment. Drought can have a huge ecological impact. It affects the groundwater level. Surface water availability goes down. So obviously it causes an ecological imbalance and affects biodiversity. Plants, forests, aquatic species, animals, they will all struggle to survive. Forest cover might go down. Many critical species, threatened species might be wiped out. Is that clear? So there will be loss of biodiversity and ecological imbalance. This could trigger the occurrence of pests, diseases, etc. As I told you, several hazardous, dangerous pathogens would get released from the wild, spread to humans and animals, and cause widespread infections. So the disease burden will go up. Pest infestation can increase because of droughts. If you look at the economic impact, if agricultural productivity is hit, the overall economy will take a hit. because any country's economy is built on the foundation of agriculture. As I told you, if food prices start increasing, it directly contributes to food inflation, and this will spill over into other sectors and commodities as well. In the long run, if the government, central bank, they're not able to tackle inflation levels, food inflation will spill over. It'll have an indirect domino effect on many other sectors, and it can cause macroeconomic stress. We may have to increase our food imports. Our import bill might increase. Let me give you an example here. See, India struggles to produce enough pulses and oil, right? That is vegetable oil or seed-based oil. So we rely heavily on imports for pulses and oil, that is edible oil. Now imagine because of drought, the cropping and production cycle is completely disrupted. So India will be forced to import to moderate the prices. So as we import more, the import bill will increase, increasing the trade deficit and putting macroeconomic stress on the country's economy. Correct? So this will affect everyone. It will affect industries, it will affect the services sector, it will affect the common man, even in cities, even the rich, the middle class. Everybody will pay the price because of large-scale inflation and disruption in supply chains. Next, food insecurity causes malnutrition and affects the health status and education status in the country. That's the devastating socio-economic impact. Children suffering from diseases, they won't attend classes regularly, they will miss out on their schooling. Correct? Men and women who are not eating nutritious food, they will suffer from deficiencies and disorders and diseases, and they can't function at their optimum capacity. They can't contribute to the economy and their families. Their earning will go down, income will go down. Whatever money they earn will be spent on medical treatment. So this is a vicious cycle that pushes millions of families into poverty. Is that clear? So that is the devastating socio-economic impact of drought. Even tourism will get affected. Energy sector, many industries dependent on water. Water dependent industries will take a massive, massive hit. Even water intensive crops like paddy, for example, right? Sugarcane, they require a lot of water. But if there is a drought, there won't be enough water available. These crops will go for a toss. Then critical industries, metallurgical industries, beverages, food processing, they all need a lot of water supply. And when there is a massive drought, government cannot provide water to these industries. So industrial production will be directly hit, causing shortage of other commodities as well, causing broad-based inflation in the economy. So it's very, very hard to estimate the actual impact of a drought. You can only come up with estimates and approximations, but it definitely has a devastating socio-economic impact, particularly on the poor people, farmers, and the rural agrarian economy. This was the social impact that I was talking about. So what happens when farmers lose their crops, when the debt burden increases, right? Farmer suicides will skyrocket. The weaker communities, especially the backward classes, scheduled tribes, scheduled castes, religious, linguistic minorities, they will face a bigger impact. They will become even more poor and backward. Social divisions will increase. People will lose their livelihood, their jobs and income, and eventually it causes mass migration, rural to urban migration. Desperate families will quit the rural areas. They will pack whatever they have, whatever they're left with, and they will simply head towards the cities to find some kind of job so that they can sustain their families. So such mass rural urban migration brings its own set of problems, especially in cities like Indian cities where urbanization is not planned. The increasing burden of rural migration causes multiple problems. It will increase the slum population. It will affect health standards, education standards, even law and order and crime could witness a disturbance, right? So that is the deep-rooted impact of droughts. Many social evils will start going up. Is that clear? People who are pushed into debt traps, who are pushed into depression, anxiety, they might abuse alcohol or drugs. Whatever money they're left with, they might splurge that on abusive products, further causing a big social burden. Social evils like dowry, child marriage might increase. Women will bear the biggest impact. The girl child will bear a bigger impact during drought cycles. So these are socio-economic impacts which you can't really measure, you can't quantify, you can't put a number on it, but it happens, right? The victims, only they know the pain and suffering caused by droughts. Even the government, despite the best efforts, cannot quantify the full impact of a drought disaster. So that is why droughts deserve our attention. We have to pay maximum attention. Now, if you look at this map, it is showing you the hazard vulnerability map for droughts. It is depicting the hazard vulnerability map of India for droughts. So the most affected region would be the arid regions of Rajasthan and Gujarat, the desert areas of Rajasthan and Gujarat, followed by central India, parts of interior central India, in Madhya Pradesh, parts of UP, Bihar, Jharkhand, West Bengal, Odisha, Telangana, Karnataka, Maharashtra, even parts of Andhra Pradesh, parts of Tamil Nadu. All these places are affected by droughts. Most affected would be the arid deserts of Rajasthan and Gujarat. Then comes central India and interior Deccan Plateau, and then few other pockets in Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Tamil Nadu. All right, these are the most affected regions in our country with regard to droughts. So please be familiar with this. Now, how do we manage the risk? How do we reduce disaster risk for droughts? What steps can we take in disaster management? All right, let's take a look at this quickly. So under the 3 stages of disaster management, we can take certain measures to plan, to prepare, to provide better response and relief, and provide for better reconstruction and rehabilitation. So what we can do is, we should have better monitoring and early warning. This is a must for any hazard. You have to make these scientific investments, create the required infrastructure to provide for such assessments, to provide for alerts and forecasts. Correct? So IMD plays a key role again with regard to estimating rainfall. ISRO plays an important role in providing satellite images and resource satellites through which we can map out the impact. So these institutions will play a critical role along with several organs of the central government and state governments. The Ministry of Agriculture will play a very important role. Ministry of Rural Development. Right? These are the concerned nodal ministries. They play a very, very important role in case of droughts. Similarly, at the state level, concerned departments dealing with agriculture, irrigation, right? Such state departments or the state governments, they all play an important role in the risk management of droughts. All right. So based on the hazard vulnerability map, we have to conserve our natural buffers, meaning we have to conserve water. When it is possible, we have to conserve and protect our rivers, lakes, wetlands, and of course the groundwater table. We should not overexploit. We should not waste water when it is available in plenty. Right? We have to save for the drier seasons, possible drought seasons. So we have to conserve and protect the natural buffers, which is crucial to manage drought conditions. Right? There might be water scarcity, but if you have stored and conserved enough water, we can somehow manage and overcome the crisis. There should be efficient management of water, particularly for irrigation and even for drinking purposes. This is a priority. Other usages of water can be prohibited in these areas. Using water for cleaning purposes can be banned, like washing vehicles, washing roads and buildings. This would be entirely banned and prohibited. Certain industries have to be shut because water for drinking and irrigation is more critical. So such measures have to be taken, and you have to create scientific irrigation infrastructure, and you should have scientific watershed management. Because even this disaster is about managing water. Just like floods is about managing water, even this is about managing water. Spread more awareness about water wastage. Right? Educate people. Spread awareness about how not to exploit the groundwater table. Groundwater table might be an insurance for us during a drought season. Even if there's no rainfall, if we have conserved and recharged our groundwater table, we can rely on it. But what have we done? We have overexploited the groundwater table. So we have to promote water conservation practices, promote rainwater harvesting, groundwater recharge, promote projects focused on afforestation, promote water conservation programs, combat desertification, which will increase following a drought cycle, protect soil fertility from erosion. Because during drought cycles, if vegetation and crops have been erased, the soil would be exposed to the elements. Imagine crops are not growing, plants and trees have died out. So the soil is exposed to the elements, the wind and other elements. So this causes massive erosion. Soil loses its fertility, the land will become barren, and eventually it increases desertification. So to right measures, you can combat desertification, you can increase afforestation, conserve water levels, and protect your soil fertility. These are very, very important measures. River interlinking is a possible solution for managing floods and droughts. India is working on a national river interlinking project to connect various drainage basins. So surplus water in a basin can be transferred to other basins where there is a deficit. That way you can reduce floods as well in the surplus basin and prevent droughts and water scarcity in the deficit drainage basins. So on paper, it sounds like a great solution. That's why many governments have actively pushed the river interlinking project. But however, this is not such an easy solution. Because executing such a mega project of linking multiple rivers is not only expensive and resource intensive, it can have a negative impact as well. If you're altering the course of the rivers, transferring the flow of water itself from one basin to another, we can't estimate what impact it will have on the ecology, on the forests, on the life forms. This is something which is a little beyond human control as well. Right? So interlinking of rivers is not an easy project. Yes, there are advantages, there are threats and concerns as well. The government has gone ahead with few river interlinking projects, like for example, the Ken-Betwa link. The government is already executing the Ken-Betwa link project, and there are a few other river interlinking projects which are going on. But there is an even more ambitious proposal, which was pushed by the then Vajpayee government, to interlink almost all the major river basins in India, from northern India to southern India. The idea is to transfer the surplus in flood-prone areas to deficit areas so that floods and droughts both can be managed. Right? Of course, there are advantages, definitely, but there are many threats, many concerns which are not addressed. It can cause large-scale ecological damage. Now, the Ken-Betwa project, for example, has led to submergence of protected areas, including national parks in Madhya Pradesh. It has threatened many animals and the forests in the protected areas. Right? These are adverse impacts. We can't keep everything under human control. So transferring excess water from one basin to another is a mega project. So on paper, it does sound like a solution, but on the ground, when you're implementing it, there are many challenges. The cost will be high, the resources needed is massive, and there could be adverse impact which we can't even anticipate. It might alter the weather. It might have impact on the groundwater table, on even the rainfall patterns in the region, right? So there are many adverse concerns which we can't account for. So that is why there is strong opposition for river interlinking projects. But the government feels that there are many benefits, and hence it is going ahead with some of the river interlinking projects. Next, crop insurance to protect the farmers. This is one way to protect their livelihood and reduce their debt burden. Insuring the crops, ensuring farmers are compensated if crops are destroyed. Livelihood planning, creating alternate livelihood options. Alternate livelihood options for farmers and the rural areas. Can you guys think of any initiative, any government scheme that we have which provides for alternate livelihood in our country, particularly in rural areas? Anyone? Very good. Abhishek, Anurag, Femina have given the answer. The Manrega scheme, the Employment Guarantee Act, through which 100 days of guaranteed paid labor is provided to the government. Manrega played a critical role in the last few years in providing much needed livelihood support to rural areas, especially farmers who lost their crops, who came under debt burden, right? They managed to sustain themselves and protect their families through Manrega payments. So such schemes, government programs, welfare measures have to be designed to protect livelihoods. Insurance schemes, we have several agriculture-oriented schemes, insurance-related schemes, right? There are crop insurance schemes provided by central government and state governments. They all play a big role in protecting the rural economy. Land use planning. Through land use planning, which is nothing but zonation standards, you scientifically plan the usage of land. Instead of providing for haphazard development, you provide for planned development based on zonation standards. You determine what kind of crops to be grown in a particular land area. You determine what kind of water projects have to be built in which area. That is essentially land use planning. So you plan for the efficient utilization of land to reduce the impact of the disaster, right? The government should know where water tanks and ponds have to be created, where irrigation canals have to be distributed. This is part of watershed management. The government should inform the farmers what kind of crops has to be grown, right? In case of drought conditions, drought-resistant crops can be encouraged. Crops which don't need much water like pulses, legumes, they can be encouraged, right? So land use planning is essential, along with strengthening the welfare schemes, health-related schemes, education-related schemes, income-related, livelihood-related schemes. They all have to be strengthened in the rural areas to support the agrarian economy, to support the poor communities and the rural farmers. And of course, you design response measures as well during the disaster. When drought has been declared, provide immediate relief. Try to supply water, at least for drinking purposes. try to arrange for healthcare facilities to take care of people who are falling sick, right? Such immediate response measures have to be given. Provide nutritious food, supply enough food for the region so people don't suffer from malnutrition or hunger. So all these immediate response measures have to be implemented along with long-term reconstruction, recovery, and rehabilitation. All right. So in the long term, you try to rebuild the rural economy. You try to create better water storage facilities. You try to create storage facilities for agricultural produce, create cold storage, warehousing facilities so crops and food items can be stored, which helps in protecting those areas from food insecurity. So all such measures can be thought of in the long term to reconstruct the area, the affected area, and to rehabilitate those people. Is that clear? So these are the broad measures we can suggest as far as disaster management is concerned for droughts. Now let us talk about few drought-related schemes that the government of India has implemented over the last 40 to 50 years. You need not mug up all the facts. You should just be aware. You should be familiar with some of the schemes, especially the recent ones. You have to be familiar with them even for your prelims. So I'll take you through some of the programs, government welfare programs focused on drought risk management. So please take a look, make a note as well, and this will complete my discussion on droughts. First program is DPAP, Drought Prone Area Program, launched in 1973. All right, Drought Prone Area Program. It was one of the first major welfare schemes launched by the Indian government to focus on drought-hit areas. It essentially focuses on effective utilization of land, water, livestock resources, restoring the ecological balance, etc. It promotes afforestation through social forestry and farm forestry. It will encourage the communities and farmers to grow trees to increase tree cover, right? That is a way of protecting your natural buffers. Next, conserving soil moisture, preventing soil erosion, developing and managing water resources, protecting livestock, encouraging animal husbandry, reshaping the cropping patterns, right? Pushing farmers to grow other crops which are drought resistant and require less water. So all such measures were taken under the scheme, the Drought Prone Area Program. As I told you, you don't have to sit and by heart all the points. Just be familiar with the name and some of the measures taken under it. All right? Just broadly remember that the program focused on land resources. It promoted afforestation, efficient water management, changing the cropping structure, supporting animal husbandry and dairy development, etc. Next, the Desert Development Program, launched in 1977-78. Under this, long-term measures for restoring ecological balance were implemented. At the community level, economic development was prioritized in rural areas, especially to support the disadvantaged sections, like scheduled castes, below poverty line families, right? They would get more support to protect their livelihood and promote their economic development. The whole focus was to promote decentralization in our rural economy and to manage drought conditions and even to tackle desertification. So such broad measures were taken up under the Desert Development Program. It was primarily implemented in the arid regions of India like Rajasthan, Gujarat, etc. The focus was on reversing desertification, protecting soil fertility, increasing vegetation and tree cover, managing water in the region, and maintaining and restoring ecological balance. All right. Of course, these schemes will look similar to one another. These are schemes that have been launched many, many decades ago. Eventually, all the schemes have been subsumed into the new schemes that we have. So if you find some common features between different schemes, don't get confused or don't get worried. That is how different schemes were formulated. Some were efficient, some were not efficient enough, but just having the basic knowledge about drought-related schemes is a little important for your prelims and needs. Next, Integrated Wasteland Development Project. The scheme focused on developing wastelands. Now, what do you mean by a wasteland? Wasteland is such a land which has become barren and unfit for cultivation and growth of plants and trees. Because of prolonged water scarcity, prolonged droughts, lack of soil moisture, soil erosion, desertification, land gets degraded. We call it land degradation. So as land degrades, over a period of time, the land becomes barren and becomes a wasteland. In these wastelands, it's almost impossible to grow anything. So the focus is on developing such wastelands through certain scientific measures, right? You can increase water supply, you can provide for some support to revive these wastelands and prevent desertification in the long run. So that's why Integrated Wasteland Development Project was implemented. A committee called the CH Hanumantrao Committee recommended the merging of all the three programs. And as a result, Integrated Watershed Management Program was created in 1995. These three schemes that we discussed, the Drought Prone Area Program, the first one, Desert Development Program, and Integrated Wasteland Development Project, all the three were merged into a single scheme, that is Integrated Watershed Management Program, in the year 1995. This was based on the recommendation of CH Hanumantrao Committee. In 2015-16, under the Modi government, this scheme is being implemented as the watershed component of Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana. The Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana is a flagship scheme of the Modi government focused on irrigation and watershed management. This is the primary scheme that focuses on providing efficient irrigation in the country to support agriculture, to manage water levels across drainage basins. So the IWMP, the Integrated Watershed Management Program, was brought under the Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana. Is that clear? So today, managing water levels in the country, planning for irrigation projects, watershed management projects is done through this program of the central government. Next, we have other related schemes such as the Niranchal initiative that was launched by the government of India with the support of the World Bank. It's a World Bank funded initiative focusing on watershed management. It supports the Integrated Watershed Management Program of the Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, and in selected states, water conservation programs are funded through Niranchal initiative. It's a World Bank funded initiative with coordination of the government of India. All right, so it's mainly focused on water conservation, promoting water management of water resources in selected states. So I have listed out the objectives of Niranchal program, and I urge you to go through this as an exercise. It's pretty much the same points again. It's focused on promoting sustainability, restoring ecological balance, conserving water resources. All right. So please go through these points once to give you a fair idea about the Niranchal initiative. But please remember it is funded by the World Bank along with Government of India. Even state governments play an important role in the implementation of Niranchal initiative. Then finally, we have the Jal Shakti Abhiyan and Atal Bhujal Yojana. Very, very important initiatives of the Modi government to tackle droughts and manage water levels in the country. Under the Jal Shakti Abhiyan, there are many focus areas for intervention. The Jal Shakti Ministry responsible for water resources and water management, works closely with concerned ministries like Ministry of Agriculture and Ministry of Rural Development. So in coordination, they implement the Jal Shakti Abhiyan. It's implemented by the Jal Shakti Ministry by working with other ministries and state governments and district authorities. It focuses on a scientific intervention from the government to conserve water and promote rainwater harvesting at the village level, to renovate water tanks, ponds, and other irrigation facilities at the village level, like removing silt, strengthening the embankments, increasing the catchment. So such upgrades and conservation measures are taken to protect traditional water reservoirs in villages. It promotes reuse and recharge, reuse of wastewater, recharging the groundwater table, overall watershed development, and afforestation. These are the focus interventions under Jal Shakti Abhiyan. Please make a note, it's very important for your prelims. And under Atal Bhujal Yojana, there is dedicated focus on groundwater conservation. It promotes the recharge of groundwater table, and it promotes awareness amongst people against water wastage, awareness regarding water wastage, and also awareness regarding over exploitation of groundwater. All these measures are taken under Atal Bhujal Yojana to protect the groundwater resources and recharge the aquifers, the subsurface aquifers, which can be a lifeline in arid, semi-arid regions and during drought seasons. Got it? So these are some very, very important schemes. So please make a note. Remember the basic facts. It's more than enough for your prelims and also for your means. So it's all in line with our disaster management objective. So all the schemes and projects we discussed, they either focus on water management, water conservation, or they focus on the rural agrarian economy, or they focus on ecological balance, restoring the ecological balance, arresting desertification and land degradation. These are the priority focus areas to tackle droughts. So if you can remember this logic, it becomes very easy to write your own answers with regard to disaster management for droughts. All right. Now, before I end the discussion, please take a look at the map. Just focus on the map here. It is depicting flash droughts in the country. Flash droughts that occur without much notice, that occur in smaller areas, in smaller regions, without much notice. Just like you have flash floods, right? Flash flood is a very instantaneous flood, very unexpected flood. Now, in a particular region, let's say there is a sudden cloud burst which was not anticipated, or there is intense heavy rainfall for 24 to 48 hours which was not expected, or there is a dam breach, or there is a glacial lake which has burst. In such incidents, there is a sudden flow of water causing instantaneous flash floods. Similarly, there are flash droughts as well, occurring in smaller regions quite instantly without much notice. In a particular rainy season, in small pockets of the country, there might be some regions which may not receive adequate rainfall. They might get inadequate rainfall, or they might suffer from sudden shortage of water, and the government may not even take notice of this, right? Authorities may not even pay attention to this because it has happened all of a sudden without much notice. So flash droughts have become quite common, and experts believe that climate change is driving more flash droughts that occur in smaller regions in one district or in few villages where there's a sudden shortage of water or inadequate rainfall in a rainy season, and authorities, if they don't pay attention, the people of the region are going to suffer. Usually droughts are prolonged, they happen over months and years, but some pockets might suffer from flash droughts that happen more quickly without much notice, leading to very quick shortage of water. All right, so this is what we call as a flash drought. So this completes my detailed discussion of droughts along with floods. So with this, we have completed two major disasters. Now, if you have any questions, please let me know. I'll take a look, and then we'll take a short break. And after the break, we'll proceed with the second module. We'll talk more about a few other disasters. I'll be explaining some very important disasters after the break. We'll take a look at tropical cyclones, cloudbursts, glacial lake outburst floods, right? Let's try to pick this up after the break. But first, I'll look at your questions, and then we can take a 15 minutes break. Rashmi is asking, should we remember drought areas of other countries? Not needed. Unless there is a major drought in a major country, right? You don't have to pay attention to droughts in other countries. Kajal is asking, can you please briefly explain about Manrega? See, Manrega is an employment guarantee scheme that promises 100 days of labor, manual paid labor for the rural community. So people in rural areas can demand work from the government, from the local authorities. So manual labor is provided to them, like building a small road, repairing a bridge, painting the school building, or constructing a water tank. Such physical tasks are assigned where manual work is involved, and rural people, if they take up the work, they get paid for it. They are given minimum wages. Some states have increased the wages as well. So they're guaranteed 100 days of paid labor. So as a result, they get extra income in a year. So they don't just have to rely on agriculture and farming. All right. So Manrega is a very important socio-economic welfare scheme implemented in rural areas. Please re-explain watershed management approach. Harshita is asking. See, watershed management is about managing water in a drainage basin. It's as simple as that. Don't scratch your head. Now, let's say, for example, let's take a big stadium. All right. In a big stadium, there are a few swimming pools. There is a water tank. There are a few water taps. Now, how do I manage all the water availability in that stadium is watershed management. Similarly, in a large area, in a particular drainage basin, there are many sources of water. There are rivers, tributaries of the river, lakes, ponds, and wetlands. Now, how do we manage the flow of the water and utilization of water? That is watershed management. So we build dams and embankments and irrigation canals. We dig bore wells. We lay pipelines, water pipelines to carry the water. We set up water treatment plants. And we supply water for irrigation, for drinking, for industries, and allow the rest of the water for ecological purposes. So this is watershed management. It's all about managing water in a particular given drainage basin. Himaya is asking, what are the government policies taken to mitigate the impact of floods? We discussed that in the last topic, right? I told you what measures are being taken under disaster management for floods. We spoke about early warning forecasting, protecting natural buffers, reducing surface runoff, creating structural barriers to hold the water, to divert the water, providing insurance, then implementing zoning standards. All those are measures for flood management. Ambesh is asking, the difference between meteorological drought, hydrological drought is not clear. See, meteorological drought occurs when there is a shortage of rainfall in one particular season. In a given rainy season, if there is a shortage of rainfall, it means there is some water scarcity. This is called meteorological drought. It's because of meteorological phenomena. Due to weather-based changes, there is shortage of rainfall, there is deficiency of rainfall in a particular region, and the water scarcity that arises out of that is called meteorological drought. But if this continues for 2-3 years, if the shortage of rainfall continues for 2-3 years, all the surface water will dry out. It will be consumed. Rivers will run dry. Dams will not have any water stored. Lakes, ponds, and even groundwater table, everything will be exhausted. So that complete lack of water supply on the surface and in the subsurface is hydrological drought. If these conditions continue for 3-4 years, then you will witness agricultural drought where crops and vegetation will not survive due to complete absence of soil moisture. If moisture is absent in the soil, right, crops will not thrive. So that is the last stage in drought, agricultural drought. Mohammed Shanwaz is asking, sir, which region witnessed more agricultural drought? Is it western part of the country or southern part of the country? With regard to agricultural drought, some arid pockets of Rajasthan and Gujarat and interior parts of Maharashtra, Karnataka, Telangana, Madhya Pradesh. These regions have suffered the most impact from droughts. Devansh is asking, all three types of droughts are limited to arid, semi-arid regions? Usually, yes. Droughts are usually limited to arid, semi-arid regions. Santosh is asking, can we achieve river interlinking projects? As I told you, river interlinking projects have many advantages and many concerns as well. On paper, it sounds like a great project, but it's very difficult to achieve them on the ground. Right? The money required, the resources needed, the effort needed is massive, and the environmental ecological concerns is very serious. So it's not so easy to achieve or execute river interlinking projects. Gunala is asking, who will pay wages to Manrega laborers? Of course, the government. Government pays the wages. That is the whole scheme. Government has set aside a budget for Manrega through which wages are paid to the workers. Anu is asking, sir, is any area presently suffering from drought in India? As of now, no, because most regions have received some amount of rainfall at least. We are in the monsoon season right now, so it will not be very evident as of now. Few months down the line, once monsoon season ends, there will be some areas which have received less rainfall, so they might suffer from drought conditions. As of now, no. Okay. So guys, these were some of the questions. Now let's take a short break. It's 6:45. Let's come back at 7 p.m. Please come back by 7 p.m. and I'll be starting with tropical cyclones. Hello everyone, welcome back to the session. Now let's take up the next disaster. Let's talk about tropical cyclones. As a topic, cyclones will be very, very important for our exams. Given the fact that India is very badly affected by cyclones every year, the topic becomes extremely important for your prelims and also for your mains. So first, let's understand cyclone formation. We'll talk about cyclone naming system as well, and we'll discuss the impact and what measures can we take in disaster management to mitigate the impact of cyclones. With regard to cyclones, we can only focus on mitigation because prevention is not possible. It's not in our hands. But definitely we can mitigate the impact through the right measures. So let's understand this topic in detail. So first, what is a tropical cyclone? A tropical cyclone is essentially a violent storm, which of course originates in open seas and oceans in the tropical areas. That is between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. The cyclonic systems, or these violent circulating storms that form in the tropical zone, we refer to them as tropical cyclones. Similar cyclonic activity is seen in many parts of the world, not just in the Indian Ocean. In the Pacific, in the Atlantic as well, there are cyclonic systems that take root, but they are known by different names. So the cyclonic system that originates in the Indian Ocean, that affects Bay of Bengal, Arabian Sea, western part of Indian Ocean, that is East Africa, these systems are known as cyclones or tropical cyclones. But the other cyclonic systems, they have different names. We'll look at it later. I'll show you a map where exactly they occur, what are the names through which they're known. So essentially, when we say cyclonic activity or a cyclonic system, it is a circulating, violent storm system that originates over the seas or the oceans and it moves towards land. These cyclonic systems, they make landfall and they cause enormous destruction along the coastline. It is primarily the coastal areas and the regions right next to the coastal areas which are the most affected by the impact of cyclones. These cyclones, when they make landfall, when they strike the landmass, they generate very high-speed winds in the range of 180 kilometers to all the way up to 250 kilometers per hour. Such strong high-speed winds are generated which can uproot everything in its path, from trees to cars to electric poles and even the roofs of buildings. Everything can be uprooted by these powerful winds that are generated through a cyclone. It also brings torrential rainfall. Extremely heavy rainfall is received that causes a lot of destruction. Trees will be uprooted, buildings might collapse, landslides might be triggered, floods might be witnessed, including coastal flooding because of the storm surge. The storm surge pushes the seawater inland towards the land, and the seawater can flood the coastline, causing massive flooding and devastation across the coastal areas. So cyclones, that's why they are feared, because they're devastating in their impact. It can cause large-scale human suffering. There can be a lot of deaths, thousands and thousands of people might lose their lives, lots of injuries, very serious damage to property and infrastructure, destruction of agricultural crops, destruction of fishing boats and the whole fishing economy, and as well as damage to the coastal environment. So tropical cyclones deserve our attention with regard to disaster management because of its impact. So first, let's understand how exactly cyclones are formed. In order to witness a cyclonic formation, there are certain conditions that have to exist. For example, there should be a low-pressure center that forms a depression. This is a basic necessity for a cyclonic system to take root. The Earth's Coriolis force generated because of Earth's rotation, right? This plays a role in the movement of the cyclone. Depending on the Coriolis force in the northern and southern hemisphere, it acts in different directions. The cyclonic system will circulate in an anti-clockwise direction in the northern hemisphere because of the Coriolis force. And since Coriolis force will have an opposite direction in southern hemisphere, the cyclones will rotate and they start moving in a clockwise direction. All right, these are some basic facts you have to remember for your prelims. So cyclones forming in northern hemisphere above the equator, they rotate in an anti-clockwise direction. Cyclones forming below the equator in the southern hemisphere, they rotate in a clockwise direction. And what is the force responsible for this rotation and direction? It's the Coriolis force generated by the rotation of the Earth. Now, let me point out the favorable conditions that are necessary for the formation of this cyclonic system. First, I told you that you need a low pressure center, a depression to form, around which the cyclonic system will start forming. That is a basic necessity. But let's understand how the low pressure center is formed. What exactly causes the depression? How does the system build up? How does it accumulate so much rain-bearing clouds? And how does it move towards land and strike the landmass eventually? So let's take a look. The first basic condition which is necessary, which has to be fulfilled for the formation of a depression at a low pressure center is that the sea surface temperature has to be sufficiently high in order to increase the rate of evaporation. There has to be constant evaporation which is happening at the sea surface so that there is a constant supply of water vapor. There is a constant supply of moisture to feed the cyclone. Cyclone is almost entirely dependent on this constant supply of moisture from the bottom. All right. So if moisture has to be constantly supplied to sustain and form the cyclonic system, you need sufficiently higher sea surface temperature. That's why cyclones will not form generally in cold seas and oceans. If the sea surface temperature is very low and rate of evaporation is low, then you don't witness a cyclonic formation in general. But in tropical areas where there is sufficient heat available, particularly during certain seasons, when the sea surface temperature is sufficiently high, around 26, 27 degrees and above, this drives the rate of evaporation. So as evaporation increases, there is a constant supply of moisture, which acts as a fuel that feeds the cyclonic system. All right, so that is the first condition. Next, there should be a strong enough Coriolis force to create the vortex, to create the circulation. To create that vortex and cyclonic circulation, Coriolis force is necessary. That's the next necessity, right? Coriolis force gives the push to the winds and they start circulating around the low depression, the low pressure center which is formed. Now see, when there is constant evaporation happening, when the warm air keeps rising, right, that forms the depression center and it attracts winds from the high pressure zones in the nearby region. All the high pressure winds will rush towards the low pressure depression. So as the high pressure winds are rushing towards the depression, the Coriolis force will give a small deflection that pushes the wind into a cyclonic vortex, into a circular movement around the depression. Then vertically, there should be a variation in the wind speed. There should be small variations in the vertical wind speed to push the warm moist air above to form the condensation and form the clouds, the rain-bearing clouds. So pre-existing low pressure depression and the rushing of high pressure winds from other areas and the push given by the Coriolis force is what creates that vortex system. And the variation in the vertical wind shear will push up the warm moist air. As it rises above, it will condense, eventually forming rain-bearing clouds and thus completing the cyclonic system. And at the top of the cyclonic system, there should be upper divergence, where the wind which has moved up will diverge and it will come back to form a closed loop. Cyclones essentially form a closed loop because of upper divergence of wind at the top layers of the atmosphere, right? So here the wind will diverge and come back and it forms that entire block, which completes the cyclonic loop. Now please take a look at the image over here. I'll explain this again. First, for tropical cyclones to form, you need a low pressure depression, which begins with fast rate of evaporation happening at the sea surface. So as the water evaporates, the moisture will rise, and due to difference in the vertical wind speed, the moisture gets pushed up, forming clouds, rain-bearing clouds due to condensation. Now that a depression has formed, there is a low pressure depression. So this low pressure center will attract strong, powerful winds from high pressure regions. From the high pressure region, the winds will rush towards the depression, and Coriolis force gives it a small deflection, pushing it around the depression, thus forming a vortex, a circulating system. This system builds up over a few days and forms a massive cyclonic system. All right. So constantly the supply of moisture has to be there for the cyclone to survive. Constantly there should be a supply of moisture which is keeping the system alive. And at the top you have these dense clouds getting formed and strong winds circulating around the depression and upper divergence which is completing the loop. This is the basic essence of formation of cyclone. Just take a look at the cross section. This image depicts the cross section of a cyclone. You can see the low pressure depression. The center of the storm is called the eye of the storm. The eye of the storm is very calm. It's known for being very stable. If you're at the eye of the storm, you can't perceive or you can't feel the strong winds and the violent vortex which has been created around it, because the center is always a region of calm. But the moisture which is rising up is forming the dense rain-bearing clouds. Then there is upper divergence at the top, which is pushing the winds back, forming a closed loop. And this system will sustain itself as long as there is moisture supply through evaporation. Is that clear? This is the basics of cyclonic formation. Now this vortex will start moving. It not only rotates around the depression, but it starts moving in open seas and oceans. So as it makes a path, it will eventually head towards a landmass. And when it strikes the landmass, that event is called landfall. Landfall is the event where a cyclonic system makes contact with the landmass. The moment landfall happens, what can you expect? The moisture supply gets cut off. Why? Because the cyclonic system has started moving towards land. So as it moves away from the sea or the ocean and enters the landmass, the moisture supply reduces and gets cut off. It's like a fast-going car which is suddenly put on brakes. What happens? The momentum will carry forward. The inertia carries forward. That is what generates the tremendous winds. So as the cyclonic system comes to a sudden halt following landfall, high-speed winds are generated that crash into the coastline, uprooting everything in their path. Wind speeds can touch almost 250 kilometers per hour. Imagine the strength. It can uplift or uproot trees and cars, and even people can be thrown away. Even buildings, especially small huts and buildings which are not well secured, roofs and windows which are not well secured, they will all be completely uprooted. Glasses will be shattered, right? High-rise buildings face a bigger risk. So there will be large-scale devastation caused by the high-speed winds that enter into the coastal areas. The rain-bearing clouds will start precipitating. There will be massive precipitation bringing torrential rainfall in the coastal area for several hours, maybe for 40 to 60 hours or even more than that. There will be extensive rainfall, almost constant rainfall received, which increases the water levels in the region. Is that clear? This sudden increase in water levels can cause floods. There could also be a storm surge. The sea water itself might surge, causing massive coastal flooding. There will be very violent tidal activity that pushes the sea water as well. And the water which enters inland floods the coastal plains, causing massive floods and devastation. If there are hilly mountainous areas in coastal region, there could be landslides as a secondary disaster. So floods and landslides become secondary, tertiary disasters in this case. Cyclone is a primary disaster, and this could trigger floods and landslides as secondary disasters. So that is the risk associated with the cyclone. Is that clear? So you can imagine the impact. You can imagine the devastation and the human suffering that is caused by these violent cyclones. Now let's take a look at the popular breeding grounds of cyclones in the world. Let's look at different regions of the world where cyclones form and what are the names through which they are called. This map gives you a very good idea. In the Indian Ocean, particularly in the northern Indian Ocean, that is in Bay of Bengal, Arabian Sea, and also in western Indian Ocean, extending towards East Africa. This is the cyclonic belt, the tropical cyclonic belt in the Indian Ocean. All right, in the northern hemisphere and also in the southern hemisphere. So all the countries present here, the littorals of these waters, they're all vulnerable to the impact of tropical cyclones. So India, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Thailand, then even Pakistan, Iran, UAE, Oman, Yemen, all these countries, even West Asian countries, could be hit by these cyclones. Coming to East Africa, especially Mozambique, Tanzania, Madagascar, Seychelles, they could all be very badly affected by tropical cyclones. So these cyclones that form in the Indian Ocean are called as just tropical cyclones. All right, there's no different name for it. It's just called as a tropical cyclone. The same system forming near Japan is known as typhoons. Even China is a victim. China, Japan, and the Korean Peninsula also is very badly affected by cyclones when it's called as typhoons. Then you have the Atlantic region, particularly near the Caribbean islands, near the east coast of United States, near Florida. This entire east coast is highly vulnerable, from New York to Florida and the Caribbean region. Here the cyclones are called as hurricanes. Is that clear? In North America, where cyclones form in the Atlantic and strikes the United States, the east coast of the US, it's called hurricanes. Florida especially is very badly affected almost every year. Then near Australia, Northwest Australia, here it is referred to as Billy Billy. These are the different names given to cyclones around the world. So in the Caribbean region and east coast of North America, Southeast Asia, China, Japan, Korea, where we call it as typhoons, the Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea, East Africa, including Madagascar, Mauritius, Mozambique, Tanzania, right? All these countries are also affected, where we just call it as tropical cyclones. So these are the popular breeding grounds for tropical cyclonic systems. There are a few rare cyclones occurring in southern Atlantic as well. It's quite rare. On the west coast of US as well, towards Mexico and the west coast of US, sometimes hurricanes occur, but it's very rare. But mostly it occurs in the Caribbean and east coast of North America, Indian Ocean, particularly northern Indian Ocean and East Africa, and parts of Asia, Southeast Asia, Japan, and China. All right. So this is where you witness the major cyclonic systems. Now talking about its impact, let's list it out. As I mentioned, the landfall event, where the moisture supply reduces and gets cut off, it puts sudden brakes on the fast-moving cyclonic system. So this inertia carries forward, generating high-speed winds, massive rains, and storm surge, leading to flooding and even causing landslides, especially if there are slopey regions in the coastal area. It will cause landslides as well. So you can guess what is the impact. There will be loss of lives, injuries to human beings, large-scale destruction of property. Houses could be uprooted and destroyed. Fishing boats could be destroyed. Coastal villages, fishing villages, they will bear the biggest impact, the fishing community, right? The cyclone will have an impact in the interior region as well. Even in the interiors, high-speed winds and heavy rains can be witnessed that causes floods and landslides. There will be severe damage to critical infrastructure. Seaports can be damaged. Airports can be flooded. Usually in coastal areas, airports might be located right on the coastline. Cities, of course, along the coastline, there will be many urban centers which could witness massive flooding. So within cities, there will be a lot of urban flooding. Then power plants, especially nuclear power plants. On the coastline, nuclear power plants can also be present, or even thermal power plants. So they will suffer extensive damage, and the risk is that if a nuclear power plant fails, it might result in a nuclear accident. It might result in radiation leakage as well as a secondary disaster. Road and rail infrastructure can be completely destroyed. Power cables, mobile and internet connectivity. So this entire infrastructure will suffer very, very serious damage, thereby imposing a huge economic cost on the region. So obviously this economic loss translates into social impact as well. Farmers will lose their crops. Their farmland will be flooded with saline seawater, thereby destroying the field for many years. For several years, the agricultural fields will become uncultivable because of the salinity that the seawater has brought it, because of a storm surge. Standing crops could be destroyed. Cattle could be killed. So farmers will bear the impact along with fishermen, and all the poor and the weaker sections will bear the biggest impact, thereby driving social divisions and inequality. There will be large-scale environmental damage. Critical ecosystems like mangroves, coral reefs, marine life and aquatic life could also suffer. So this is the devastating impact of cyclones. Is that clear? Now, what is India's vulnerability? How exposed is India towards cyclones? What are the recent cyclones we have witnessed? And what is the naming system? Who came up with this? And what is the convention that is used to name cyclones? That is something we have to cover. If you look at cyclones in India, cyclones occur both in Bay of Bengal and as well as in the Arabian Sea. Essentially, across the northern Indian Ocean, cyclone formation is quite common. But comparatively, east coast of India was more vulnerable until recently. It was always considered that east coast of India is the most vulnerable with regard to the impact of tropical cyclones. And it was assumed that west coast is less vulnerable. And there's a reason for that. Because in Bay of Bengal, we witnessed more cyclones taking shape compared to Arabian Sea. Also, Bay of Bengal cyclones were more severe. They would turn into extreme severe cyclones, causing very severe extensive damage along the east coast of India. So Tamil Nadu, Puducherry, Andhra Pradesh, Odisha, West Bengal, they were the most affected. These cyclones of Bay of Bengal, they can curve to hit Bangladesh, Myanmar, and Thailand as well. Even Andaman Nicobar Islands was in the path. And traditionally, the west coast, in the Arabian Sea, number of cyclones were relatively less comparatively. And also the impact was less. Until a few years ago, let's say until 20 years back, Arabian Sea cyclones were very few, and most of them would be of a low intensity. And usually they wouldn't strike the west coast of India. They would recurve to move towards Pakistan or Iran or West Asia. They wouldn't head towards the west coast, striking the Indian coastline. But this trend is changing right in front of our eyes. In the last 10 to 15 years, we are witnessing a dramatic shift happening in the Indian Ocean with regard to cyclonic activity. We are witnessing more cyclones taking shape in the Arabian Sea, and they are achieving higher intensity and they are striking the west coast of India. In the last few years itself, we have seen devastating severe cyclones hitting Kerala, Gujarat, Maharashtra. Cyclone Biparjoy is the latest example. Just a few weeks ago, Gujarat and as well as Maharashtra were very badly hit by Cyclone Biparjoy. Few years back, we had Cyclone Okchi, which hit Kerala and caused massive devastation. Even Lakshadweep Islands was affected. Sri Lanka was affected. So what we are seeing is a changing trend. Bay of Bengal also witnesses more cyclones and high impact cyclones, but in Arabian Sea as well, we are witnessing more cyclonic activity in the last few years. So let's look at the vulnerability map and let's understand the reasons behind the formation of cyclones in Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea. Why do we witness more cyclones in Bay of Bengal compared to Arabian Sea? Traditionally, why was this possible? Now, what is happening? What is driving more cyclones in Arabian Sea? That is something we should understand. So this map gives you an idea regarding the vulnerability of India. Obviously, the entire coastline is vulnerable from Gujarat to West Bengal, and even the island territories, that is Andaman Nicobar and Lakshadweep, even they are vulnerable. But as I told you, traditionally, usually we believe that East Coast was more vulnerable because of more cyclones forming in Bay of Bengal, and many of them would hit high intensity, turning into severe cyclones. So as a result, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Odisha, West Bengal, they have taken the biggest impact. Like the super cyclone I mentioned yesterday in 1999, which devastated Odisha. 10,000 people were killed in Odisha because of the super cyclone. In 2016, Chennai and Tamil Nadu were devastated by a massive cyclone. Is that clear? West Bengal was hit just a few years back by a massive cyclone. So generally, East Coast is considered as more vulnerable compared to the West Coast. All right. So let me explain the reasons. This is very important for your prelims and mains. Why is Bay of Bengal prone to more cyclones and high intensity cyclones compared to Arabian Sea? And then I'll explain the changing trend. All right. According to available data, historical data from the last 150 odd years, Bay of Bengal has seen approximately 5 times more cyclones than Arabian Sea. Please remember this. On an average, per year, Bay of Bengal witnesses 5 times more cyclonic formations than the Arabian Sea. And also, our general understanding was cyclones taking shape in Bay of Bengal are stronger and more deadlier. They are more intense with the ability to cause very serious damage. All right. The general understanding was cyclones in Arabian Sea are usually weaker, very less as well. And even if they form, they will recurve towards West Asia, Pakistan, or Iran, usually sparing India. It was very rare for an Arabian Sea cyclone to hit the west coast of India. But this was the previous trend, and now we are witnessing a change. 58% of cyclones formed in Bay of Bengal hit the coastline, the east coast of India, whereas only 25% of them have struck the west coast, which are formed in the Arabian Sea. So that is the difference which existed. And now slight differences are coming up, slight changes happening in this trend. So let's examine the reasons that are responsible. Of course, there has to be some geographical explanation, which explains why Bay of Bengal witnesses more cyclones and high intensity cyclones compared to Arabian Sea. Now, before I explain the reasons, can you guys tell me the cyclonic season in India? Can you guys mention the months in India when we witness cyclones? Anyone give the answer? June, May and June. Okay, very good. Apart from May and June, is there any other season? September, very good. November to December as well, very good. There are 3 seasons, but in particular, right? In 3 phases, we witness cyclonic activity in the Indian Ocean. One is pre-monsoon. You can write this down. Before the monsoons arrive in the month of June, during May to June, and sometimes in April as well, we witness cyclones, especially in Bay of Bengal. April, May, sometimes to the first week of June, that is before the arrival of monsoons. All right. This 50 to 60-day period is a high-intensity cyclonic period, especially in Bay of Bengal. Then during monsoon, September to October, even then we witness cyclonic activity. It's very rare that it becomes a severe cyclone, but it has happened in the past. Then after the monsoon, post-monsoon, November to sometimes January, usually November and December, but sometimes rarely January as well. This is the cyclonic period. All right. Now, with this understanding, let's look at the differences between Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea. That way, you will understand why Bay of Bengal witnesses more cyclones and high-intensity cyclones. The first reason is the temperature difference. Please write down these points. The first reason is the difference in the temperature. All right. Bay of Bengal is warmer compared to the Arabian Sea. It's a very, very important point. Since Bay of Bengal is warmer, the sea surface temperature is higher, the rate of evaporation will be higher. Please understand the link. Bay of Bengal has higher surface temperature compared to Arabian Sea, meaning the rate of evaporation is faster in Bay of Bengal compared to Arabian Sea. So as evaporation is more, there is more moisture available to feed the cyclone and to form the low pressure depression. That's a key difference. Next, the sea surface temperature difference and the humidity levels, of course, plays a direct role here. So you have to understand why Bay of Bengal has more temperature compared to Arabian Sea. Is there any reason behind it? One reason is that Bay of Bengal receives more fresh water flow from the east flowing rivers of India. Is that clear? Most of the rivers in India are east flowing rivers. I'm sure you have studied this in geography. Be it Brahmaputra, the Ganga, many South Indian rivers as well. They're all east flowing. So there's a higher flow of fresh water, which is warm water. So as a result, it prevents the mixing up of warm water with cold water. Since constantly warm water is coming to the rivers, the east flowing rivers, at the top you always find a warm layer of water. It prevents the mixing of the colder water and warm water from below. And as a result, the sea surface temperature remains higher. The warm water remains higher. Is that clear? The cold water is more dense. It is found at the bottom, right? The warm water which is coming in, which will eventually mix to moderate the temperature will go down. But since east flowing rivers of India are constantly bringing fresh water, fresh warm water, the mixing of warm and cold water gets disrupted. And at the top, you'll find more warm water, which increases the sea surface temperature. Clear? And also, Bay of Bengal receives more rainfall, meaning more fresh water, which is warmer, and thus the sea surface temperature is higher. Compared to that, in the Arabian Sea, right, the west flowing rivers of India are very few and very small as well. We do have west flowing rivers in Goa, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Gujarat, Kerala, right? But the number of rivers are lesser and the volume of water they bring is also less. So the amount of fresh warm water mixing with cold water in Arabian Sea is less. So warm water gets mixed up easily and the temperature goes down in the Arabian Sea. This is why the temperature difference and humidity difference exists. Towards the east coast, there is more humidity. Towards Bay of Bengal, more humidity because of more evaporation and more moisture in the atmosphere. All right. This is related to higher rainfall received here and the constant fresh inflow of warm water. All right. Whereas this is relatively less towards the Arabian Sea. And as a result, warm water gets easily mixed with cold water, the temperature goes down, thereby eliminating one of the favorable conditions for formation of a cyclone. The other important factor is that Arabian Sea receives very strong winds, which dissipates the heat and also breaks up any cyclonic activity. Compared to Bay of Bengal, Arabian Sea tends to receive stronger winds. This dissipates the heat, moderates the heat at the sea surface temperature. So all these factors are responsible for the difference in sea surface temperature and humidity levels. Then there are other factors as well. The absence of a large land mass between the Pacific Ocean and the Bay of Bengal. If you look at the map, you will notice that there is only one small land mass that divides Bay of Bengal from Gulf of Thailand, South China Sea and the Pacific. It's the country of Thailand. Thailand is the only divide. That Thailand becomes very narrow. There's a very narrow strip of land mass that is bifurcating Bay of Bengal from South China Sea. So cyclones that form in the Pacific, near Philippines and in South China Sea, these systems transport themselves. They get pushed over Thailand and crosses over into Bay of Bengal. The export of cyclones from the Pacific to Bay of Bengal brings extra regional cyclonic systems, which also contributes to more cyclones in Bay of Bengal. Is that clear? So all these factors are responsible. It's a combination of them. It's not just one reason. Now, we are witnessing a change taking place in this pattern. Until recently, we always saw that Bay of Bengal was witnessing more cyclones, correct? And it was suffering from more high intensity cyclones. That is why we always believe that east coast of India is more vulnerable. Comparatively, number of cyclones were less in Arabian Sea, intensity was also less. Even if they formed, they usually recurved to hit West Asia or Iran or Pakistan and not west coast of India. But this trend is changing. In the last 15 years, we are clearly witnessing a changing trend. Even in Arabian Sea, more cyclones are getting formed, that too of higher intensity. And the worst part is that they are striking India. They are curving back to hit the west coast of India. So what could be responsible for this? Experts believe it is global warming. Because of climate change, sea surface temperatures has gone up in the Arabian Sea as well, according to several latest studies. Even India's IMD is of a similar opinion. Also, the changing wind currents in northern Indian Ocean, again because of climate change. These factors are contributing to more evaporation in the Arabian Sea, contributing to more intense cyclones and more number of cyclones, which are curving to strike the west coast of India. That's why Gujarat, Maharashtra, Goa, Karnataka, Kerala, even they are becoming vulnerable in the last few years. Is that clear? Even now, Bay of Bengal is the most vulnerable. All right, but vulnerability towards west coast is also increasing because of the rising sea surface temperature in the Arabian Sea. So you have to be mindful of this development. It's a development we are witnessing in the last 10 to 15 years. Now, before we talk about cyclone risk management, why don't we discuss the naming system? First, I would like to talk about the naming system for cyclones. And after that, we'll discuss disaster management for cyclones. The first question is, why should a cyclone be given a name? Why give a name to a cyclone? What's the need? We don't name floods. We don't give a name to an earthquake. Then why are we giving names to a cyclone? Can anyone tell me? Any idea? Does anyone know why cyclones are given names? Femina says to alert the people. Okay. Labdi says to check the pattern. I think he means to study the cyclone. Okay. Good. You guys are almost right. See, until a few years back, cyclones were not given names. They were assigned very complex numbers. Meteorologists, scientists, researchers who study cyclones, who keep track of cyclonic systems, they used to give these complicated names. An alphanumeric name would be given, which was very hard to remember, right? So even if alerts are given by using that alphanumeric code, people can't associate with it. I'm sure you would have seen this during COVID-19 pandemic. When different variants came up of COVID-19, of SARS coronavirus 2, initially the genome sequence was used as a name, it was a number which was assigned, and people found it hard to remember that. And then WHO came out with the naming system and gave simpler names like alpha variant, delta variant, omicron variant. When such easy names are given, it's easy to remember, easy to communicate, easy for the common man to understand, easy for the media and the government to spread the message. That is the prime intention. It helps in giving alerts, spreading awareness about the looming threat, and also helps in studies and research. Because meteorologists, scientists, they log the data, they keep the data, they study cyclones that have occurred before. So if a simple name is given to it, it's easy to remember that event, easy to flag all the data, attach all the data to that cyclone, give out alerts in the media. Now imagine in, let's say, newspapers, TV channels, in messages and social media, if IMD would say that cyclone 12304A7XZ, this cyclone is headed towards India, no one will associate with it. People will find it very complicated. If simple names are given like cyclone Biparjoy, cyclone Hudhud, right? Then cyclone Okchi. When such names are given, it's easy for people to remember and associate with it. Becomes easy for the media, for the government to spread alerts and spread awareness, and helps researchers as well to document the data for historical studies. That is the reason why cyclones are named. So the World Meteorological Organization has come out with a naming convention. The World Meteorological Organization has come out with a naming convention, which is followed by the Regional Specialized Meteorological Centers, RSMC, for tropical cyclones. So around the world, there are different RSMCs, which look after different zones where cyclonic activity is witnessed. For example, to monitor all cyclones in northern Indian Ocean, the RSMC is located in New Delhi, which is operated by our IMD. So India's IMD is the nodal agency for tracking all cyclones in northern Indian Ocean and to give alerts to all the countries in northern Indian Ocean. So IMD not only tracks the cyclones and gives alerts to Indian authorities, it will alert other countries like Bangladesh, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, even Pakistan. When cyclone Biparjoy occurred a few weeks back, IMD issued alerts and India passed on the alerts to Pakistan as well. Is that clear? Because we are the designated nodal agency. The Regional Specialized Meteorological Center is in New Delhi, where IMD operates the center, and we are responsible for tracking all cyclones and giving alerts to all the countries in northern Indian Ocean. Similarly, there are other regional specialized meteorological centers. We have one in Mauritius and French Reunion. It's a French territory, La Reunion, next to Mauritius. So there you have a RSMC for southern and western part of Indian Ocean. In Japan, there is another regional center for tracking and naming cyclones. In Hawaii, at Miami in Florida, in southern Pacific. So these are the regional cyclone tracking and naming centers that follow the naming convention of World Meteorological Organization. So according to the convention, all the countries in that region, the affected countries, the littorals of that water body, they give out a list of names. If you look at North Indian Ocean, countries which are affected by cyclones includes Bangladesh, Maldives, Myanmar, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Oman, Yemen, Thailand, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and UAE, right? And of course, India. So all these countries together, they suggest a list of names. Each country gives around 8 to 10 names usually. All right, it's like a repository, and the names they choose will be very simple because it could be in different languages. A name given by Iran should be understandable in India as well. Name given by Myanmar should be understandable in Sri Lanka. So every country puts a lot of thought into it. They choose very simple sounding names with a simple meaning, and they choose it usually from their local languages. So you have a pool of names that are created, and one by one, the names are chosen by the regional center. They go in alphabetical order. They would have arranged the names in alphabetical order, and they go one by one, naming all the cyclones using the names suggested by the countries present in that region. Understood? So that is the way in which cyclones are named. There is a global naming convention laid out by WMO. It's followed by the regional specialized meteorological centers, and accordingly the names are assigned. So names are suggested by all these countries. So the list is maintained, and one name after the other is picked in an order to assign them to the next cyclone. Is that clear? Now, coming to disaster management of cyclones. How do we deal with it? How can we reduce disaster risk? Very simple. Since you have understood floods, this will be very easy and simple. We can quickly go through this. First and foremost, come out with effective early warning forecasting systems. Today, thanks to technology, you can accurately predict the formation of a cyclone, track its movement in real time, and even estimate the exact place and time of its landfall. Is that clear? Through satellites, Doppler radars, and various other meteorological sensors, we can capture real-time data, track the formation of a depression, a low pressure center, and monitor the system in real time if it turns into a major cyclonic system. And accordingly, names are assigned to it. A name is given to it, and then it is categorized as a severe cyclone, extremely severe cyclone. So different categories are there under which the cyclone is placed based on the threat, and the exact path also is calculated. The approximate path is going to take will be calculated, and the landfall is also identified. The place and the time is brought out, and the alerts are immediately issued to all authorities, to the central government, state, district authorities, the people, the media. Everyone is informed about the alert through IMD. IMD is the nodal agency for early warning for cyclones as well. Is that clear? Then, of course, risk analysis is also important to identify vulnerability, to identify exposure, which district, which villages are more exposed and more vulnerable. Thorough risk analysis has to be done through scientific assessments. This is all in pre-disaster planning and preparedness. And then you start taking proactive measures, flood control measures, as we discussed previously. Create flood barriers, right? In coastal areas especially, barriers, retention walls can be set up. Japan has done this. Japan, which is a very big victim of typhoons, right? It has created barrier systems that can hold the coastal flood back. It can hold some of the storm surge back, thus preventing or at least reducing the impact of coastal flooding. You can divert that water, protect and conserve the natural buffers, like tree cover, mangrove cover, wetlands. If you protect these natural buffers, they act like a cushion which absorbs the impact. If the coastline has tall trees, especially coconut trees and strong trees, they can cut the wind speed, they can withhold some of the wind speed. That's a natural barrier you're creating. Mangrove forests found in wetland areas, coastal wetlands, in backwaters, estuaries, they play a critical role in cutting the impact of a cyclone and even a tsunami. Mangroves can cut the speed of the wind and the floods. The speed of wind, the speed of floods can be cut through tree cover, mangroves, and wetlands. Wetlands can act like a sink, absorbing the excess water, right? So if you conserve and protect your natural buffers, it automatically mitigates the impact. All right? Then, zonation standards. That is zoning. In order to implement land use planning, how will the land be used? If you restrict, regulate, and prohibit human and economic activities, you can reduce the impact. Have you heard of CRZ rules? Coastal Regulation Zone, right? These rules have been notified by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. So along the coastline, for a few meters, human activities, construction, industrial activities, mining is restricted or prohibited or regulated. Through such implementation of zoning standards, you can reduce human presence of infrastructure and buildings in coastal areas. The CRZ rules mandates that within a certain distance of the coastline, you can't have any hotels and resorts. You can't have large industries or mining projects. You can't have large infrastructure projects taken up within the specified coastal regulation area. So different zones are identified with different regulatory and prohibitory standards that restricts human activity, economic activity, and construction. So even if the disaster happens, the impact will be less if you follow the zonation standards. Then you can suggest all the other measures like livelihood planning, cyclone shelters, very, very important for evacuations. Then well-designed, engineered structures which are strong enough to withhold the impact of the wind and the rains, and overall capacity building through awareness, training, then even mock drills, mock exercises to train the people. All these measures are very critical. You have to create alternate livelihood, especially for fishermen and farmers. If fishing boats and villages are destroyed, what will the fishermen do? If agricultural fields are flooded with salt water, what will the farmers do? So some livelihood planning has to be put in place. Alternate income has to be created. Cyclone shelters is a very important structural measure. So all across the vulnerable coastline, you can build these large community centers. During a regular time, you can use it as a school or as a community hall for events and functions and etc. Right? Or as a government office space. But the same building can be turned into a shelter during these hazards. So cyclone shelter also acts as a tsunami shelter. Right? The same infrastructure, the same measures will help for tsunami as well. So cyclone shelters you create, it has to be in a slightly higher area where waters will not reach easily. You can't build a shelter in a low-lying area. Right? So once you build these large community centers where thousands of people can be accommodated, the district authorities will quickly act to evacuate the people from the coastal areas. Is that clear? Then all across the coastline, alerts have to be sent. So this has to be sent to media, social media, messages to mobile phones. All mobile phones in the region can be sent a SMS blast. You can also install sirens and hooters, which will go off, immediately alerting all the people along the coastline. India has actually put in place the system. After the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, right? And following repeated cyclones, India has created an alert system along the coastline, especially East Coast. Along vulnerable districts, there are sirens and hooters that are installed, which will go off immediately as soon as the alert is raised by IMD. All right? The district authorities will swing into action. The district collector, the whole administration, the police force, they will all swing into action. They will go from village to village, advising people to leave immediately or to secure any loose items and loose materials which will not fly off when the cyclone makes landfall. So they will take the people, evacuate them to the shelters, accommodate them for a few days, give them food, any other support, medicines needed, and then they can come back to their normal life. This is a basic measure. Today, NDMA, along with other authorities, are sending SMS blasts as well. Some of you might have received messages regarding forest fires, landslides, or cyclones. Right? This is a system we are putting in place, and it's becoming very, very effective. That's why today a cyclone has very less death count in India. Look at the cyclones in the last 10-15 years. Death count is in single digit, or maximum is in lower double digit. In 1999, the super cyclone in Odisha killed 10,000 people. Look at the difference. This is a tremendous success that India has achieved because of its disaster management. the Disaster Management Act, the institutions that were created, the NDMA, NDRF, our investments in early warning and forecasting, our preparedness, the training that we have done, the mock drills we have carried out regularly, this has spread awareness amongst the people. Now people know in the coastal areas what to do if the sirens go off or if they receive a message. Right? They don't wait for officials to come for them. They themselves will evacuate, move to higher reaches and try to reach the cyclone shelters. So this is the effective system India has put in place. That is the reason why we have brought down the impact of cyclones, at least with regard to loss of lives. Is that clear? But loss to infrastructure, property is still there. Loss to environment is also there. Right? So that is where we can strengthen our infrastructure as well. We can make our infrastructure more resilient to proper structural measures. When we are building these projects, you have to incorporate them into the design, right? To better engineering, better architecture. You can create stronger facilities and infrastructure projects which can withstand the impact of tropical cyclones. Please don't forget, India has some critical facilities located on the east coast. We have Sriharikota, our space center for launching India's satellites and rockets, right? Then we have nuclear power plants, Kalpakkam, Kundakulam in Tamil Nadu. Then we have major naval bases like Visakhapatnam and many other naval bases. That's in Visakhapatnam, we have our nuclear submarines. Then near Balsor, you have APJ Abdul Kalam Island, which is a DRDO missile testing facility. All these are critical facilities of India. We have major ports, right? Paradip, Kolkata, Haldia, Visakhapatnam, Chennai, Tuticorin. All these are major ports of India. They could all suffer extensive damage. We also have cities like Chennai and others, right? So it's very important to make our infrastructure resilient to withstand the impact of these disasters. Because we know every year there will be cyclones. Particularly in Bay of Bengal, East Coast will be hit by at least 3-4 severe intensity cyclones. So we have to plan in the long term, create resilient infrastructure. All right. And of course, during disaster, you provide very efficient relief through search and rescue operations. So the Navy, Coast Guard, NDRF, SDRF, they all play a role in searching for people, rescuing them. There could be boats which are stranded in the sea. They may have to be evacuated by the Navy and Coast Guard. There could be people caught in floods and landslides. They will have to be rescued. So the armed forces, Navy and Coast Guard especially, Indian Air Force play a critical role. Specialized disaster response forces like NDRF, SDRF play a very important role. And once the disaster ends, you focus on your long-term recovery. You focus on long-term reconstruction, rehabilitation of the people. You try to rebuild the damaged infrastructure, right? So that should be a constant effort in order to make the region resilient, to reduce the disaster risk by reducing vulnerability and exposure. Clear? So India has launched the National Cyclone Risk Mitigation Project. It's a flagship program of the government of India to reduce our vulnerability with regard to cyclones. The focus of this initiative is on early warning dissemination systems, the alert systems. I was talking about installing sirens, hooters, sending a SMS blast, right? These systems are being put in place under this project. Increasing the capacity of local communities to respond. You can't expect local communities, villages to wait for state forces and central forces to come. They might take a lot of time. So you have to strengthen your local communities at the village level. The fishing community, the coastal villages, they have to be trained. You should give them adequate training too. They should know what to do when alerts are given, right? They have to stop all fishing activity. Any boats which have already gone out, they have to come back. They have to secure all the loose material. And they have to move to higher places and try and reach cyclone shelters. So community-driven initiatives are important. There should be easy access to the emergency facilities. And the focus is on mainstreaming these risk mitigation measures. So this is the Cyclone Risk Mitigation Project of India, through which we have reduced vulnerability and exposure, thereby reducing disaster risk associated with cyclones. This is a very big achievement for India. India has done quite well when it comes to cyclone management. Right here. So this completes my detailed discussion on tropical cyclones. Please let me know if you have any questions, any doubts. I'll answer them. And we still have 20 minutes in which time we can talk about the next disaster, that is a cloud burst. All right, so please bring up the questions. DRM full form, disaster risk management. Break. Why second break? We already taken a break for 15 minutes. Vijay is asking, can't we construct dams on Eastern River? Of course, we have constructed dams on Eastern rivers to provide for irrigation, drinking water. We have built many dams on Eastern rivers. Yashwant is asking, so please explain the changing trend in Arabian Sea. See, the changing trend in Arabian Sea is that in the last 10-15 years, we have noticed more cyclones taking shape in Arabian Sea compared to before. And also some of them are becoming very intense cyclonic storms. The reason behind it is the higher sea surface temperature in the Arabian Sea in the last few years. And experts believe that this is a result of global warming. Climate change, global warming is driving higher sea surface temperatures, thus increasing such extreme weather events. Niranjan is asking, is it advisable to follow NDMA website guidelines? Yes, NDMA is the nodal authority for disaster management. So please take a look at NDMA's website. Take a look at the guidelines given by NDMA as well for every disaster. It will help you in your answer writing. Santosh is asking, how can we compete our risk management system with Japan systems? See, Japan being a developed country, it has made those right investments. It has invested in technology. It has invested in creating early warning forecasting systems. It has created structural measures to create barriers and retention walls to hold back cyclones and tsunamis. And it has focused on training and awareness. So this comes with consistent effort. And India is also getting there. Right? We are not far behind. Few years ago, India was performing very poorly in disaster management in 1990s. But since the Disaster Management Act, we have seen a radical transformation in our approach. We have also made structural institutions have been set up, architecture has been created. We have a dedicated law. There's a policy and plan in place. A lot of funds are allocated for the right technology for early warning and forecasting. Right? So India has made a lot of progress in terms of disaster management. So if we continue on this path, we will get to a stage where Japan is today. Right? Today, Japan is one of the countries which is most resilient for disasters. See, Japan is very prone to earthquakes, but it has minimal damage because most of the buildings in Japan are earthquake resistant or earthquake proof. Japan has ensured this through very strict enforcement of the building codes and zonation standards. That is what India should do. Now, northern India is highly vulnerable to earthquakes, but still, we have not enforced the building codes. 99% of the buildings in northern India, take Delhi for example, they are not even earthquake resilient. 1 6 or 7 magnitude earthquake can be enough to wipe out entire cities. That is where we have to make a change. Right? We have to learn from Japan and enforce the strict guidelines and construction codes. Prabha is asking, apart from warm water from rivers, is there any minerals responsible for warm temperature in Bay of Bengal? No. Minerals will not contribute to it. It's mainly the constant flow of warm water throughout the year, right, which increases the sea surface temperature in Bay of Bengal. It will not mix with cold water properly because constantly throughout the year, 365 days, there is warm water coming into our eastern rivers. Sachin is asking, sir, instead of evacuating every year, why don't they provide permanent solution? There can't be a permanent solution because see, we can't prevent cyclones from taking place. Cyclones will happen. They will strike with very severe intensity. Only option is to evacuate. Right? Even tsunamis, you have to evacuate the people to higher reaches. Shamil says, salinity in Bay of Bengal is also a major factor. Yes, salinity also, experts believe, plays a role in moderating the sea surface temperature. Sir, can we expect a question on comparison of our system with Japan's? Yes, why not? Definitely. There could be a question asking you to compare India's disaster management systems with that of Japan. Just basic awareness is enough. You will study India's disaster management architecture, right? You will have a fair idea, a broad idea about Japan's policy and systems. So you can bring out the comparison. Lovely is asking which engineered structure for cyclones for risk management. When we say engineered structure, we are referring to better architecture, better design, better engineering of a building. Like when houses are built, right? Instead of building kacha houses, build pakka houses. Use concrete roofs instead of tin roofs. Because during high-speed winds, tin roofs will be blown off. But concrete roofs and concrete structures can withstand. When roads are built, when power lines are laid, when mobile internet cables are laid, right? You design properly, use better architecture, better engineering to make them resilient. That's what we meant by engineered structures. Parveen is asking, sir, cyclones and tsunamis can also be man-made. Cyclones cannot be man-made. Tsunamis can be man-made. I'll come to that later. We'll discuss tsunamis later. Tsunamis can be man-made. There's a possibility where tsunami can be generated through a man-made activity, but cyclones not possible. Nikki is asking CRZ rules. CRZ stands for Coastal Regulation Zone Guidelines. That's for environment and ecology. All right. As far as disaster management is concerned, just know that CRZ rules regulates construction activities, economic activities in coastal areas. So by prohibiting certain activities and by restricting certain activities, it is minimizing the presence of human beings along the coastline in the sensitive areas. So even if the disaster happens, the damage will be less. Can floods be man-made? Yes, floods can also be man-made due to negligence. If a dam is not properly operated, right, and if there's an accident, if the dam breaks, that's a man-made flood. Or if there's a terror attack, or during wars, we saw that happening in Ukraine just a few weeks back. A very important dam in Ukraine was targeted, most likely by Russian forces. This dam breach caused massive floods in Ukraine and affected many places. Right? Please read about it. So floods can be man-made. Okay. Now let's take up the next topic. Let's try and cover cloud burst at least as much as possible. All right, and we can stop after that. What is a cloud burst and how does it affect us? A cloud burst is a condition, it's a hazard where you witness a massive amount of rainfall occurring in a short time period in a small region. This is called a cloud burst. All right, when there is extreme rainfall, way above normal, but in a small region in a small time period. Now, if a region receives rainfall worth 60 hours of rain in just 2 hours, such events are cloud burst events, where an entire rain-bearing cloud system would have precipitated very quickly, bringing all the water down, and this can cause flash floods. It can trigger flash floods and also landslides. So cloud burst is the primary hazard, causing secondary, tertiary hazards like flash floods and landslides. So it's an event where an extreme amount of rainfall is received in a small region, in a small period of time, in a short period of time. So very quickly, large volume of water is dumped by the cloud system, and especially if it happens in a hilly mountainous area. Usually cloud bursts occur in hilly mountainous regions. For example, in the Himalayan belt. It can occur in Western Ghats as well. Even though it's rare, it can occur in Western Ghats as well. But it's more common towards the Himalayan region. All right? From Himachal Pradesh to Uttarakhand, Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh, they're all highly prone to cloud burst events, including few other parts of India. Few western areas in Western Ghats, few pockets in Northeast India, and interestingly, few pockets in Rajasthan and Gujarat as well. All right? So these events, which bring heavy rainfall, it dumps a large volume of water in a small region in a short period of time. So there's a sudden excess flow of water. Right? The carrying capacity of all water bodies will be breached. The river channels, the lakes, they won't be able to hold the water back, and the water will spill out in an instantaneous manner, causing massive floods in the downstream area. Such sudden, unexpected flooding is called a flash flood. It happens within seconds or minutes. The reaction time available is very less. Is that clear? In cases of extreme rainfall causing floods regularly, you get some notice at least, maybe a few hours notice, or at least 1 or 2 days notice. In case of cloudbursts and flash floods, the notice is maybe seconds or minutes, maybe 1 hour, not more than that. So water will gush down the stream, causing massive flooding in the downstream areas. The mechanism involved here is that when rain-bearing clouds, they are pushed up a mountainous surface, a hilly surface, right, from the windward side towards the leeward side. These rain-bearing clouds, they rise up, right? They keep rising up the hilly, slopey surface, and as they reach the top, they precipitate. This is how the windward side receives rainfall, whereas the leeward side becomes a rain shadow region. So as these cloud systems, rain-bearing cloud systems are rising up, under ideal conditions of temperature, pressure, they can condense and precipitate very quickly at very short notice, dumping this entire water in one go in a small region. Is that clear? In few specific regions, the whole water can get dumped in few hours, thereby causing floods in the downstream and triggering landslides. So such an instantaneous event is called a cloud burst. To recognize a cloud burst, there is a threshold which has been set. If the rainfall exceeds 10 centimeters per hour in a small area, that is a minimum threshold, more than 10 centimeters of rain in 1 hour. So this is common in the Himalayas and few other pockets of India as well, but most vulnerable would be Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Sikkim, and Arunachal Pradesh. All right? The cloud systems that move up the landmass, as they reach the windward side, at the top of the windward side, they could precipitate suddenly, bringing this massive rainfall, particularly in the mountainous regions. So what will happen? It will cause floods and landslides. Right? It will cause flash floods and landslides. I think after this, you know the impact. You know what happens when there is a flash flood. There will be loss of life, damage to property, damage to infrastructure, damage to environment. And of course, it results in socio-economic loss as well. So once you understand few disasters, it becomes very easy going forward. The impact and even the disaster management approach, you can easily understand and explain that. Such flash floods can cause heavy siltation of rivers because of the massive movement and deposition of sediments. When such a large volume of water is flowing at such a fast rate, it picks up all the silt and sediment, pushes it down, and all the dirt, the rock material, sediments will all get deposited in the rivers, causing long-term ecological damage. So that is why cloud bursts have to be considered as a major disaster. Thanks to forecasting technology, it is possible to provide early warning and forecasting. Again, IMD is responsible. But when it comes to cloudburst events, the forecast is still very inaccurate. This is where we have to improve our weather models. Our weather forecasting models have to be made more accurate by deploying better technology, by using supercomputers, AI algorithms, satellite data. Right? We have to pinpoint potential cloudburst events before they occur, at least few hours before they can happen. So if alerts are given, we can carry out timely evacuation in the downstream area. So this has to be a priority in disaster risk reduction. As of now, we have early warning forecasting, but it's very inaccurate. IMD is not able to pinpoint every single cloudburst accurately. So with better investment in technology, we should be able to get to a stage where we can even anticipate cloudbursts. And then, of course, the measures are exactly the same. It's not different. Whatever you do for floods and landslides, it's the same measures, right? You try to implement non-structural measures like zoning standards. You bring out strict rules and guidelines and bylaws. Enforce the zoning standards to ensure that land use planning is efficiently done. Prevent human habitation, prevent hotels, prevent towns and cities coming up in the plain areas. Regulate the way in which land is used through zoning standards. Enforce the laws strictly. That is a non-structural measure. Right? Any measure which is not related to structure or building, that's a non-structural measure. Structural measures include building dams, embankments, creating diversion for flood water, creating retention walls. These are structural measures. Then you improve your rescue, your emergency relief, carry out effective search and rescue, and then of course provide long-term rehabilitation and reconstruction. So here as well, focusing on the local community is very important. In fact, this is the case for every disaster. Be it any disaster, empowering the local community is critical to build resilience within the community. All right, you build resilience through capacity building. You enhance the capacity of the local community. Now, how do you do that? You can do that through better awareness, through regular training programs, through mock drills, and by providing the required resources to the local community. That is how you empower the local community to take charge in times of disaster without waiting for government officials, rescue forces, without wasting any time. If local community can respond on its own, that is when we build true resilience against disasters. This is what will help in disaster risk reduction. This is the focus of Sendai framework as well, to empower the local community. So the central government, the state government, district authorities, they have to spread that awareness, conduct regular training at the local level, conduct mock exercises and drills, and provide them with the required resources. That is called capacity building. You build the capacity of your local community. So if your local community is empowered, they can act on their own during times of disasters and save precious lives and also minimize damage to infrastructure and property. All right. So cloudburst causes floods and landslides. So if you understand the phenomena and the measures needed, it's enough. And the places vulnerable in India, especially Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, even Sikkim to an extent, and Arunachal Pradesh. All right. So that is enough for today. We have covered a number of important topics. So let's wrap up the session. Let's look at any pending questions, and after that we can close for today. I'll be here for a couple of minutes. Let me know if you have any questions. Aditya is asking, does any developed country has the technology to predict cloudbursts? The United States and even few European countries, right? They are having advanced resources with them. They rely on very accurate satellite data, which they run through AI-based supercomputers that crunches the weather model and gives very accurate estimates. So how IMD will give alerts on cloudbursts? By tracking the weather phenomena, by tracking the meteorological phenomena. IMD keeps a constant watch on cloud formation, temperature levels, pressure conditions, and by running this through a weather modeling system, right? The computer simulate the phenomena, the meteorological phenomena, and gives quite accurate estimates. So that is how IMD gives out alerts. So what is non-structural measure? Any measure not related to construction of something or building of something. That is non-structural. See, building a cyclone shelter, building a dam, or building retention walls. Those are structural measures. You're creating a structure to protect against a disaster. Those are structural measures. So anything that's not related to a structure is non-structural. Your regulations, guidelines, bylaws, building codes, construction standards, right? All such measures are non-structural. Santosh is asking, sir, does CWC have any part in giving alerts to with regard to cloudburst? CWC gives alerts only for floods. If a cloudburst causes a flood, then CWC comes into picture. But in case of cloudburst, you don't have enough time to give alert for a flood. You can anticipate a cloudburst, but after it has happened, there's no time left to give out an alert for floods. But CWC is responsible for floods. IMD is responsible for all meteorological events. Main cause for cloudburst, it's a natural geographical phenomenon. It's a natural meteorological phenomenon. All right, the clouds which rise up, right, because of the convection currents, they cool down and suddenly precipitate sometimes. That is when ideal conditions exist for rainfall. When they have the right temperature, the right wind and pressure conditions, there's a sudden unexpected precipitation which might happen. So it's a natural process. That is why cloudbursts occur. Ashutosh is asking, doesn't cloudburst always translate into flooding? Yes, cloudburst will always translate into a flash flood because when such a massive volume of water is received in a small region, that too in few hours, it will cause a flash flood. Monica is asking, can we mention Chernobyl disaster with regard to man-made disasters? Yes, definitely. It's a nuclear incident. We will mention that. We'll come to man-made disasters later. So Chernobyl is an example for nuclear accident. Sachin is asking, is it possible to create a man-made cloudburst? No, not possible. Can cloudbursts occur in southern India? Yes, as I told you, in parts of Western Ghats, it is possible. Okay. So guys, these are the questions. I think that's enough for today. We have covered a lot of topics. I hope you guys liked the session. Do let me know how it went in the comments. I'll take a look. And let's meet tomorrow. We have a few more disasters to cover. We'll finish all the natural disasters and then take a look at man-made disasters. So I'll see you tomorrow. Till then, take care and do let me know how the class went. That's it. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.